I remember that April evening in New Haven like it had been carved into my bones with a dull blade. My partner, Riley Vargas, and I were winding down our night shift when dispatch crackled through the radio. Unit 14, respond to the Maplewood Inn. Possible assault. Room 14. Female screaming. The voice on the other end didn't sound right. Tight, trembling, desperate. Dispatchers are trained to keep calm no matter what they hear. But this one sounded barely composed. The hairs on my arms lifted. The Maplewood Inn wasn't a place that drew attention. A squat, forgettable building tucked behind a half-dead shopping plaza. Its flickering neon sign buzzed through the drizzle. Vacancy. As we turned into the lot, I noticed only 2 cars parked near the far end. Fluorescent lights stuttered above us, their glow painting long, jaundiced streaks across the wet asphalt. Riley glanced at me as we stepped out. "You feel that?" "Yeah," I muttered, my hand already resting near my holster. "Something's off." Room 14's door stood slightly ajar, a sliver of yellow light spilling across the concrete walkway. I drew my weapon, the metal cold and steady in my hand. Riley took position beside the door. "Police," I called, voice low but firm. "Ma'am, are you all right?" No answer, then a rustle inside. We pushed the door open. A woman sat trembling on the edge of the unmade bed, her nightgown rumpled, hair matted, eyes fixed on something we couldn't see. She looked mid-30s, maybe younger under the exhaustion. He shot me," she stammered, her voice paper-thin. "But he's still here. He's going to—" She froze. Her gaze darted to the dark corners of the room. I scanned quickly. No blood, no gun, no signs of a struggle. The air smelled of mildew and cheap air freshener. On the nightstand sat half-empty prescription bottles. Diane Garrett, one printed neatly on each label. "Ma'am," I said softly, lowering myself to eye level. "Who did this to you?" Her lips trembled. "He told me not to tell." Every creak of the floorboards made her flinch. Riley crouched beside her, speaking gently. "You're safe now, okay? No one's here." But the inconsistencies began to pile up. She couldn't recall her own phone number, her address, or even her family's names. When I asked for ID, she hesitated, her hands shaking. Riley checked the motel's guest log and froze. This says Diane Garrett checked in 2 nights ago. So?" I asked. He looked up, pale. "Diane Garrett's been dead for 6 years." I turned back toward her. Her breathing hitched. Her pupils dilated. My name isn't Diane," she whispered. "It's Carla Hendrick." For a heartbeat, no one moved. The air felt heavy, electric. Carla's story came out in broken, gasping fragments. She'd been abducted as a teenager by Diane Garrett's husband, Ronald Aum. For 6 years, he'd forced her to live as his dead wife, teaching her to mimic Diane's voice, her handwriting, even her laugh. Every photograph in that room, every folded blouse in the drawer, every document, carefully constructed lies. "He taught me everything," she said, trembling. "How to answer questions, how to smile the right way, how to cry on cue. Every day I practiced being someone I wasn't." Her voice cracked and I felt something cold twist in my gut. This wasn't just captivity, it was erasure. The room suddenly felt suffocating, like the walls themselves had been listening. I looked around again, more carefully this time, and found it. In the corner, behind a faded curtain, a small wardrobe. The latch was newer than the rest of the furniture. I tugged it open and saw fresh locks drilled into the wood. Riley exhaled beside me, voice low. Jesus Christ, she lived in here. And somehow the silence that followed was louder than any scream. Subtle gouges marred the wood paneling, faint but deliberate, hinting at years of forced confinement. Pages of a yellowed diary lay open, edges curled and stained, each line a meticulous record of Ronald's manipulations, a step-by-step blueprint of a predator's calculated mind. Carla's hands trembled as she traced the scrawled words, each sentence dredging up the terror she had lived daily. He told me if I ever told anyone, he'd find me, he'd make me disappear. Her voice wavered, eyes wide and haunted, and I believed him, every single day. It was hard to fathom the depth of control one human could impose over another, particularly over someone so young. Her fear wasn't confined to the present. It was a psychic imprint of 6 years of relentless domination, a conditioning that had eroded her trust in her own thoughts and memories. Riley and I dug deeper. Motel records, local archives, interviews with neighbors. Weeks earlier, Ronald Garrett had ended his own life in the basement of the very motel where he had kept Carla captive. The room she'd inhabited remained untouched in many ways, yet its walls carried the residue of her trauma. Even with Ronald gone, the echoes of fear lingered. Every creak in the HVAC, every flicker of shadow down the hall sent her pulse racing. We contacted her family in Pennsylvania. Their tears fell freely as they absorbed the story. A mixture of shock, anger, and a fragile relief that Carla had survived years of invisible torment. The reunion was a jarring collision of joy and sorrow, a moment where disbelief hung heavier than the hugs. Later that week, Carla confided in me quietly. Months on, she still felt the weight of Ronald Garrett's presence, as though the motel itself had absorbed him. The walls seemed unwilling to relinquish the control he had wielded over her. With careful deliberation, Carla agreed to return with us to the motel. She needed to see the space where she had been imprisoned, to reclaim the boundaries of her reality. The lobby smelled unchanged. Stale coffee, damp carpet, faintly bitter cleaning chemicals. As we entered room 14, she froze. It looks the same, she whispered. Every detail aligned perfectly with her memories. The wardrobe, the nightstand, even the worn, threadbare carpet. She edged toward the window, peering at the empty lot outside. I don't feel scared right now, she admitted, voice low, steadying herself. But it's still heavy, like he left a shadow that never fully lifts. We spent hours there, documenting evidence and gently guiding her through memories, separating her genuine recollections from the rehearsed responses Ronald had drilled into her. Piece by piece, she began reclaiming herself, identifying which thoughts, emotions, and habits were hers, and which had been imposed. By the end of the visit, Carla exhaled, a slow, deliberate release of air. "It's over," she said, though whether she truly believed it remained uncertain. I clung to hope that she could finally begin to heal. Carla returned to Pennsylvania, beginning therapy and reconnecting with the family she had been forced to forget. The motel remained behind her, a dark chapter of her life, but no longer a prison. Sometimes when I drive past quiet motels or deserted streets in New Haven, I think of her. The memory lingers, not merely of Ronald Garrett's cruelty, but of Carla's extraordinary resilience. She survived years of psychological captivity, navigating trauma so profound it is almost impossible to comprehend. She once told me, "I feel the shadow sometimes, but I'm learning it's not me. I can step out of it." And that is what matters. Survival is not simply escaping physical danger. It is reclaiming the mind, the identity, and the autonomy that were stolen. Even weeks later in my quiet apartment, I hear the faint creak of the floorboards or the low hum of the heater, and I think of Carla. Her strength is a reminder. Evil can leave invisible marks, hide in plain sight and linger quietly, but vigilance, empathy, and courage can restore what was taken. True survival is not just living, it is reclaiming yourself. Long before the blood and the broken watch, before the endless nights staring at the ceiling, straining to catch noises that didn't exist, I believed I was chasing nothing more than a dream. That's what ambition feels like when you're young. Bright, reckless, seductive, convincing you that pain is proof you're alive. It was October 2002 when I stepped off the bus into Tijuana, Mexico. The air hung heavy with salt and exhaust. It carried the acrid tang of hot metal and the faint, persistent smell of the sea. I was 29, hungry for something bigger than my life in Portland. My company had offered me a chance to manage a cross-border partnership, a golden opportunity, my boss had said, and I had grabbed it without hesitation. One suitcase, a kiss for Claire, promises to call every night, and I was gone. The Sandalia Motel squatted at the edge of the city, where the paved road gave way to dust and the night smelled of tequila and gasoline. Its neon sign flickered sporadically, buzzing as if unsure of its own existence. Cracked stucco walls hinted at years of neglect. Still, I convinced myself it had charm, even character. At the front desk, a young man named Raul smiled at me. But it didn't reach his eyes. His hair was slicked back perfectly, his uniform starched and neat. I handed him a $50 tip with a nervous chuckle. "American hospitality," I said. He laughed, but it sounded hollow, almost rehearsed. "Enjoy your stay, senor," he said, sliding the key across the counter. "Room 7, Quiet side. That night I lay on the thin mattress, thoughts spinning. Claire, the promotion, the watch on my wrist. My father's watch. To the one who never gives up. He'd given it to me the year before he died of a heart attack. I had never gone a day without it. It was a promise, a tether to him, a reminder I was still trying to honor. Outside, the highway hummed faintly. I didn't know it then, but that constant, restless sound would follow me for years. The next morning I woke before dawn. My meeting in the city had gone better than I dared hope. Contracts signed, handshakes exchanged. For the first time in a long while, the world seemed to be tilting into alignment. When I called the motel for a cab, Raoul answered. "Si, senor?" he said, too eager, too friendly. Of course. As the sun dipped behind the horizon, the cab arrived. The driver said little. Older man, expressionless, dark glasses, even though the night had already swallowed the light. The city gave way to quieter streets, puddles catching orange reflections from the street lamps. I noticed how unnervingly empty it all felt. Then came the screech. Tires burned. A car appeared from nowhere, blocking the road. Doors burst open. 4 masked armed men poured out, shouting, threatening. The driver didn't flinch. "Your wallet," one yelled, waving a gun. My hands shook violently as I handed it over. My phone followed. Then one of them saw the glint on my wrist. "Take it off," he ordered. It was like someone demanding a piece of my father. I hesitated, just for a heartbeat. The gun cracked against my cheek. Warm, coppery blood filled my mouth. My ears rang. "Take it off." I unclasped it. My hands were slick with sweat. The man snatched the watch, gave a mocking salute, and leapt back into the car. They were gone, leaving only the smell of exhaust and a deafening silence. I turned to the driver, expecting anger, panic, anything. But he sat there, hands steady on the wheel, face unreadable. "Drive," I whispered. He obeyed. At the motel, I stumbled into the lobby, blood dripping freely. "You called that cab," I shouted at Raoul. "You set me up." He looked at me with those same hollow eyes. "Senor," he said softly, "you must have been unlucky." Behind him, a shadow shifted in the hallway. Someone listening. I ran. Didn't pack, didn't look back. I just ran. By the time I reached San Diego, dawn was breaking. On the bus, I stared at my reflection. Swollen cheek, split lip, no watch, only the imprint where it had been. I told the border agent I'd been mugged. He nodded as if he'd heard it all before. Back home, Claire tried to comfort me. "You're safe," she said, cupping my face, warmth against my bloodied skin. But safety had already begun to feel like a lie. But something inside me had shifted. Safety no longer felt real, not even at home, not even with Claire's arms around me. A week later, I bought a replica of my father's watch, same model, same engraving. To the one who never gives up. But when I held it in my hand, it felt hollow, like a lie. The real one was still out there, somewhere in the dark, on the wrist of someone who didn't deserve it. I called the Tijuana police. They took a report, nodded politely, and never followed up. Months passed. I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd been marked. At night, I dreamed of that cab, of Raoul's polite, hollow smile, of my father's voice murmuring, "Don't give up, son." I drank more than I should. Claire noticed. "You're still there, aren't you?" she asked one night, her voice low and tired. "In that place?" I said nothing. And she was right. Then one morning, scrolling through an online forum, I read that the Sandalia motel had closed. Health violations, one post said, but a few replies hinted at something darker. Disappearances. I didn't want to believe it. Deep down I did. 2 years later I went back. Not out of courage, obsession. I told Claire it was another business trip, but the truth was, I couldn't live another day not knowing. I rented a car in San Diego and crossed the border. The road to the Sandalia was overgrown now. weeds cracking through the asphalt. The sign was half buried in dust. The motel itself crouched there, abandoned, windows shattered, paint peeled to bone. I pushed open the door. It groaned like a living thing, and inside the air smelled of mildew and old memories. Room 7 was still there. My suitcase, my papers, they were gone, of course, but on the nightstand lay something small, glinting faintly in a crack of sunlight. My watch. I picked it up. The hands were frozen at 11:46. I turned it over. The engraving was scratched but still legible. To the one who never gives up. My stomach twisted. Someone had left it there, waiting. I didn't stay long. Heart hammering, I walked out, half expecting to see Raoul behind the counter, watching. But the lobby was empty. Only dust, only silence. When I reached the car, a young man in a security uniform appeared from behind the building. "You shouldn't be here," he said, voice low. "This place. Bad things happened." I nodded. "I know." He tilted his head, eyes sharp. "You one of them?" "No," I said quietly. "Just someone who got lucky. It's been 20 years now. I'm 49. The replica watch sits in my dresser drawer. The original, the one from that motel, I keep locked away. Not because it's valuable, but because it reminds me of everything I almost lost. Claire left eventually. I can't blame her. I was living in two worlds, the one I walked through and the one that replayed endlessly in my mind. After that, I started writing. Stories about roads that go nowhere, hotels that smell like regret, people learning the hard truth. Safety is an illusion. Sometimes late at night, I still hear the hum of the highway. I tell myself it's just the wind, but deep down, I know it's something else. A reminder that every choice carries a cost. When I close my eyes, I see that younger version of myself, the one full of hope, wearing my father's watch like it could protect me from the world. If I could speak to him now, I'd say one thing. You can't outrun what you don't understand. Life teaches us that not everything lost can be replaced, and not every second chance is a blessing. Trust is precious, but blind trust can destroy you. The past doesn't disappear when you escape it. It lingers, waiting for you to face it. Sometimes survival isn't about bravery. It's about knowing when to walk away and never looking back. I'd spent most of my adult life chasing the perfect shot, the kind of photograph that made strangers pause mid-page, their eyes catching on something they couldn't quite name. People like to imagine it was a glamorous life, but most days it was just mud, bad coffee, and the quiet humiliation of missed chances. That winter of 2011, I was 34, tired, and broke enough to start wondering if I was still chasing art or just running from a steady paycheck. I'd been sent north for a wildlife series, timber wolves in the snow. My partner bailed when the forecast turned ugly, but I went anyway. I'd told myself, courage separates the great from the forgotten. Later, I'd learn it mostly separated the reckless from the lucky. By the time I realized how fast the blizzard was rolling in, I was 40 miles from the nearest town. My crew had already called it off. The truck fishtailed more than once, tires whispering over ice, and the wind screamed hard enough to erase the road shoulder. I didn't even notice the sign until it flickered through the white Pine Hollow Motel. I don't know what made me pull in. Instinct, maybe, or just exhaustion masquerading as bravery. The parking lot was half buried in snow, the neon sign sputtering like it was fighting for its last breath. Inside, a weak bell jingled as I pushed open the door. The lobby was dim, smelled faintly of cold air and mothballs. A woman appeared from behind the counter, frail, probably in her late 70s, a shawl pulled tight around her shoulders. "Rough night to be on the road," she said. Her voice was thin and papery like wind over dry leaves. "You're lucky we're still open." Her name tag read, Mrs. Clausen. "Yeah," I said, stamping snow from my boots. Didn't think I'd make it much farther. She nodded slowly, not really looking at me, eyes fixed somewhere over my shoulder. "Room 9, she murmured, sliding a tarnished brass key across the counter. "Don't mind the wind. It gets loud up here." I paid in cash. Her fingers brushed mine, cold and dry as parchment. "Thank you," I said, forcing a smile. She didn't answer. The hallway smelled of dust and old kerosene. Only one light worked, humming faintly overhead. Just another lonely stop between assignments, I told myself. Just another night. I didn't know then how long that night would follow me. Room 9 looked like a time capsule from the 70s. Wood paneling, faded floral curtains, a TV that probably only played static. The heater wheezed to life, coughing dust before settling into a low, uneven groan. I hung up my parka, plugged in my laptop, and made instant coffee that tasted faintly of rust and cardboard. I tried to edit my shots, but my eyes kept drifting to the window. The silence outside wasn't peaceful. It was dense, the kind that presses against your skull until you start hearing your own heartbeat. I pulled the curtain aside. Snow poured down in thick sheets, glowing orange under the single parking lot light. Beyond that, nothing but endless woods. Sometime after midnight, I must have dozed off at the desk. When I woke, it was to a sound, a dull, distant thump. At first, I thought it was ice sliding off the roof. Then came another, closer. I rubbed my eyes, pushed up from the chair, and shuffled to the window. The glass was fogged, breath white, but through the condensation, I saw them. Footprints. A single line leading from the tree line straight toward my window, then stopping. No return tracks, just ending there. Probably old, I muttered. Snow must have buried the rest. Still, my pulse was thrumming in my ears. I checked my phone. No signal, of course. Pulling on my coat, I stepped outside, telling myself it was just for peace of mind. The cold hit like knives, sharp enough to sting my teeth. The prints were fresh, edges clean, the snow still loose, not yet crusted over. They led directly from the woods to my window. Nowhere else. I followed them halfway before stopping, breath turning to smoke in the dark. Something about the way those footprints ended. No turn, no stumble, not even a hint of hesitation. Made the hair on my arms rise. It wasn't how people walked. It was how things stopped. I went back inside, heart hammering in my chest, and shoved a chair under the doorknob. Then I laughed, too loud, too forced, a nervous bark that didn't sound like me. "It's fine," I muttered to the empty room. "It's just snow. Just wind." But the heater moaned again. A hollow metallic sound that shuddered through the vents, and the window rattled in its frame like something outside was testing it. The room didn't feel fine anymore. It felt like a stage set after the actors had gone home. Hollow, waiting. By 2:30, sleep was impossible. Every few minutes came a noise, a faint scrape, a shifting creak. Maybe the wind. Maybe not. Eventually, I decided to find Mrs. Clausen. Tell her I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was outside. Maybe she'd laugh, calm me down. The lobby was empty. The single bulb above the desk flickered weakly, buzzing in the silence. Behind the counter, the office door stood slightly ajar, and from inside came a faint murmur, a voice undercut with static. French, I thought. A radio. "Mrs. Clausen?" I called softly. No answer. I stepped closer, knocked on the door frame. The radio hissed once, then fell silent. The air changed, heavier somehow, colder. The kind of cold that feels like it's watching. Behind the desk, I noticed the key rack. No car keys hanging there, no tags. And on the open guest register, only one name. Mine. The prickle at the back of my neck deepened into a chill. I turned and walked quickly down the hall. Halfway to my room, I glanced through the window at the parking lot. The footprints were different now, closer. They reached right up to my door. I locked it again, this time dragging the dresser across the floor until it jammed against the frame. Every sound after that felt pointed. The wind wasn't random anymore. It was rhythmic. The heater's groan felt like breathing. Even the clock's tick seemed to wait between beats. Around 3, there was a new sound. A faint, deliberate tap, tap, tap against the glass. I froze. 3 taps. Then silence, and then a voice. A man's voice, calm even. "You left your light on." Not a question. A statement. Adrenaline erased everything else. I grabbed my tripod, fingers slippery with sweat, holding it like a weapon. "Who's there?" I shouted. Silence. Then the faint crunch of snow, slow and receding toward the woods. My phone was still useless. New signal, new lifeline. My pulse thudded in my ears as I shoved my feet into my boots, grabbed my truck keys and wrenched open the door. The night hit me like a flash grenade. Blinding white, wind slicing sideways. The footprints now led away from my door, disappearing into the black shape of trees. And then I saw it. Every window in the front row of the motel stood open, curtains billowing like pale hands in the storm. Everyone except mine. That broke something in me. I ran. The truck engine coughed twice before catching, headlights carving through the snow. I didn't look back. The road was half buried, the world reduced to white in panic, but I kept driving. For the first time in years, I prayed. Quiet, desperate, like a man bargaining with something that might be listening. By the time the sky turned gray, I was just outside Winnipeg. I pulled into a diner, shaking so badly I nearly spilled my coffee. My mind replayed everything in fragments. The woman's distant eyes, the empty register, that voice at the window. I told myself I'd call the motel later. Explain, apologize, maybe send money for the room. But part of me didn't want to hear her voice again. Around noon, I finally made the call. The number rang twice before a man answered, voice flat, mildly irritated. Pine Hollow Motel. Hi, I said, my throat dry. I stayed there last night, room 9. I think I left some equipment behind. A pause. Then, you must have the wrong number. Pine Hollow's been closed for years, since 2007. I laughed, a brittle sound. No, that's impossible. I spoke to an older woman, Mrs. Clausen. There's no one by that name, he cut in. That property's condemned. The call ended. My stomach dropped like a trapdoor. That night, I woke to the faint scent of pine. My camera bag sat at the foot of my bed, the same one I'd left behind at the motel. A small puddle of melting snow spread beneath it. I didn't open it right away. I couldn't. When I finally did, the lens cap was streaked with thin lines of mud, and on the inside pocket, clear as day, were footprints. Small, pressed from the inside out. I've told myself there's a logical explanation. Maybe I grabbed it half asleep. Maybe someone mailed it back. But it never left my sight after that morning. And every January, when the wind claws at my apartment windows, I hear it again. 3 slow, deliberate taps. Sometimes the past leaves footprints you can't explain. Not because it's supernatural, but because fear itself can carve its own truth. Trust your instincts. Respect your limits. Know when to walk away. Survival isn't about courage. It's about listening when something deep inside whispers, leave while you still can. I never thought a routine Friday night could twist the way I saw the world forever. My name's Dylan Reed. I was 20 then, a college kid in Eugene, Oregon, barely keeping it together with a part-time job delivering pizzas. It wasn't much, but it paid rent and let me breathe without asking anyone for help. That night, in October 2019, the rain hadn't stopped since dusk. Sheets of it blurred the streetlights and mist clung to the air like smoke. The neon signs of shuttered shops blinked in and out through the fog, pale ghosts in the wet dark. I'd just picked up an order from the downtown pizza place when my boss crackled through the headset. Dylan, this one's a good one, tip heavy. Willow Creek Motel, edge of town, 3rd floor. Guy says it's a party. Great, I muttered, rubbing a hand over my eyes. Willow Creek Motel. I'd passed it 100 times, and every time something about it made my skin crawl. The kind of building that looked fine from a distance. Bright sign, fresh paint, but up close it felt wrong. I'd delivered there before, but never to the 3rd floor. By the time I pulled into the cracked parking lot, the rain had thinned to a mist. The pavement shimmered, reflecting the motel's flickering neon sign like a pulse. The air carried that sour mix of mildew, cigarettes, and something older, something rotten under the surface. The lobby was empty. No chatter, no TV humming from the back office. Just a dusty counter, a stack of faded brochures, and a tarnished bell that left a gray smudge on my finger when I pressed it. Above the desk, a security camera tilted with a faint mechanical whine following me. I cleared my throat. Delivery for room... A door creaked and a tall, thin man stepped out from a back hallway. His smile was stretched too wide, like he'd been caught mid-laugh at a joke only he understood. His eyes never quite landed on me. They flicked around, jittery, like he was scanning invisible movement in the air. 3rd floor, he said, pressing a small envelope into my hand. Party's upstairs. Make sure they get the pizzas. His voice was calm, too calm, and something about it felt rehearsed, deliberate. My stomach nodded. It wasn't just what he said. It was how he said it, like he was testing how quickly I'd obey. Sure, I murmured, pocketing the envelope. The stairwell was colder than it should have been. The air hung heavy, damp, and smelled faintly of old carpet and wet wood. My shoes made sticky sounds against the floor with every step. The overhead light flickered so fast it made the shadows twitch like living things. It's just an old building, I told myself quietly. That's all. By the second floor, I noticed a door cracked open. I slowed, curiosity gnawing at the edges of my fear. Inside, chairs were stacked in messy piles. The air stung faintly of smoke. Something burned maybe days ago, but no one was there. Maintenance, I whispered. Probably just maintenance, but I didn't believe it. Not really. The third-floor corridor felt stretched, as if the hallway itself had lengthened since I started climbing. The fluorescent bulbs hummed and blinked, their light breaking in uneven bursts. Shadows pooled between doors and slid forward as I walked. My palms were slick around the pizza boxes, and I had to shift my grip before they slipped. There was a faint metallic tang in the air. Blood, maybe, or rust. I couldn't tell. When I finally found the room number the man had given me, I hesitated. The door was old, its paint peeling in strips, the frame warped like it had swollen from years of rain. I knocked once, then again, no answer. I tried the knob. It turned easily. Too easily. The door creaked open, spilling a breath of cold, stagnant air into the hall. Inside was darkness, deep and absolute. No voices, no music, no laughter. Just the faint drip of water somewhere above. The silence pressed against my ears until I could hear nothing but my own pulse. Hello? My voice came out smaller than I intended. Pizza delivery? Nothing. And then, from behind me, the metallic click of the stairwell door. Help me carry them inside, said a calm, almost whispering voice. I turned. It was the man from the lobby, his smile gone now. His face was still, eyes sharp and predatory, gleaming under the dim hall light. The way he looked at me, steady, assessing, made my stomach twist hard, like he was studying a specimen, like he'd been waiting. Something was wrong, deeply, unmistakably wrong. The realization hit like ice in my veins. One pizza box slipped from my hands, then another. They hit the damp carpet with a wet, muffled splat. The smell of melted cheese and tomato sauce mingled with mildew and stale smoke until the air itself felt spoiled. Adrenaline surged. I didn't think, I just ran. The hallway seemed to tilt beneath me as I sprinted, my shoulders scraping against the wallpaper to keep balance. Every shadow seemed to stretch and grab as I passed, the flickering lights distorting the corridor into something unreal. My breath rasped in my throat as I reached the stairwell. My shoes squeaked against the soggy carpet, loud enough to make me flinch. The stairs felt endless, slick beneath my feet. Halfway down, I slipped on a wet patch, my ankle twisting painfully, but I kept going, half limping, half falling. Behind me, footsteps, slow, deliberate, patient. The sound was steady, rhythmically matching mine, but never rushing. He wasn't chasing me. He was following, like he already knew there was nowhere to run. Leave me the hell alone, I shouted, but my voice cracked, swallowed by the empty stairwell. The only reply was the echo of my own words, and the steady tread of his shoes, one after another, soft but relentless. By the time I reached the lobby, my chest was burning, vision swimming. The counter was empty. No envelope, no man. Just the same motionless brochures and that single security camera above the desk, its lens slowly tilting to track me. Please, I gasped, stumbling toward the exit. I grabbed the handle, yanked hard, nothing. It didn't move. Panic hit full force. I slammed my fists against the glass, the sound sharp in the dead air. Come on, open! The handle finally gave. The door swung outward and rain exploded against me. Cold, sharp, punishing. I didn't care. I ran into it, the downpour drenching my clothes instantly. The gravel of the lot was slick. I slipped, hit my knees, tore my palms, scrambled back up. My car sat where I left it, half shrouded in mist. I fumbled for the keys, hands shaking so hard I dropped them twice before finally jamming one into the ignition. The engine sputtered, choked, then roared to life. Tires spun in the mud as I tore out of that parking lot, my heart pounding in time with the wipers beating against the windshield. Even after I hit the main road, I couldn't stop shaking. My hands trembled so violently on the wheel that I had to pull over just to breathe. I sat there in the rain, headlights carving pale tunnels into the fog, wondering what the hell had just happened. Weeks later, I saw a story online. Local news. The Willow Creek Motel had been abandoned for months. No guests, no staff. Just an empty shell of a building rotting on the edge of town. I remember staring at the article until the screen blurred. Whoever had called that order had known where I'd be, what route I'd take, and how I'd react. It wasn't random. It was calculated. The more I thought about it, the more it made sense in the worst possible way. Every detail, the empty lobby, the forced smile, the party upstairs, had been part of a setup. Not to scare me, not at first, but to guide me. To push me where he wanted me. Like a mouse through a maze. I realized how close I'd come to disappearing that night. One hesitation, one wrong turn, that could have been it. When I told my friends, they laughed, called it a creepy story, said I was exaggerating. But I remember the feeling too clearly, the deliberate control, the invisible strings pulling me into danger step by step. That wasn't panic or imagination. That was someone using fear like a tool. Years later, it still clings to me. I avoid empty buildings, dark stairwells, any place where silence feels too complete. Every flickering light, every strange delivery call, my pulse spikes before my brain even catches up. Sometimes I drive past the old Willow Creek Motel. It's fenced off now, the windows shattered, the sign half missing, but every time I feel my chest tighten, my hands grip the steering wheel until my knuckles whiten. In my mind, I can still see that grin, the one that stretched too wide, hovering behind a third-floor window, patient as ever. That night never really left me. It taught me something I can't unlearn. The world's quiet isn't safety, it's camouflage. Danger doesn't always roar or chase. Sometimes it waits silent and watchful, until you walk right into it. Curiosity can be a noose if you don't trust your instincts. Awareness, caution, and the willingness to listen to that small voice of fear, those aren't paranoia. They're survival, because real danger doesn't announce itself. It hides in plain sight, watching, waiting for the one moment you stop paying attention. I still remember that summer heat, the kind that pressed against your skin until it felt like breathing through syrup. July 1996, I was 12, old enough to see that the world didn't always make sense, but still young enough to think my mother could bend it back into shape if she just tried hard enough. We were leaving Tucson for Los Angeles, chasing what Mom called a fresh start. I didn't know what that meant. Not really. All I knew was that my parents had stopped talking, except when they were arguing in low, sharp voices that never quite went away. Then one morning, Mom was stuffing our lives into the trunk of a faded green Toyota Camry, the kind with bumper stickers curling at the edges like tired smiles. Caleb, my 8-year-old brother, was slumped in the back beside me, legs sticky from the vinyl seats kicking Mom's chair every few minutes. "Are we almost there yet?" He groaned. "Almost where?" I asked, half teasing. He stared out the window, squinting against the glare. "Wherever Mom thinks happiness lives." He said it so simply that it stayed with me long after the desert blurred into ribbons of asphalt melting under the Arizona sun. Mom hummed now and then, her voice barely audible over the rattle of the AC. Every few miles she twisted the radio knob, hunting for a station that wasn't just static. I watched her from the back, her hand steady on the wheel, the other tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. The exhaustion was there, sitting just under her eyes, but so was something else. Resolve, maybe. By the time we rolled into Yuma, the sky had turned a dusty orange, heavy and low. The Camry's engine wheezed like it was exhaling relief. The Blue Lantern Motel appeared at the edge of the road. A squat, one-story building with paint peeling in strips and a neon sign that blinked vacancy, like it was barely holding on. The pool gate leaned crooked and a Coke machine droned outside the office. Inside, the air smelled of bleach and something metallic, sharp and cold. Mom filled out the guest form while Caleb leaned against me, eyelids fluttering. That's when I noticed him. A man sitting in the corner. He looked like he'd grown out of the desert itself. Cracked skin, boots dusted white, eyes the color of scorched earth. He didn't move, didn't smile, just watched. "Mom," I whispered, tugging at her sleeve. "That guy's watching us." She glanced over her shoulder, quick, assessing, then turned back to the clerk. "Ignore him, honey. He's probably just tired like us." But when she took the room key, I could still feel his eyes on us, following, measuring. Room 17 reeked of old smoke and bleach. The carpet was stiff and left black grit on our socks. The air conditioner rattled like it was trying to escape the window frame. Caleb threw himself on the bed and flipped through channels until Full House flickered on, the colors washed out and ghostly. Mom sat at the edge of her bed, pressing her fingers to her temples. 10 hours on the road, she sighed. We'll swim, grab some food, and call it a night. Outside, the pool glowed turquoise under a swarm of buzzing tiki lamps, their plastic faces lit by dying bulbs. Caleb was already tugging on her hand. Come on, Mom, you promised. I followed, half wishing I hadn't. The air was heavy and wet. The deck radiated heat even as the sky went purple. My swimsuit clung to my skin, and then I saw him again. The man from the lobby. Sitting near the fence, still in those same dusty clothes, boots planted firm, his face unreadable. Watching. Mom saw him too. Her jaw tightened. 10 minutes, she muttered. So we splashed, pretending not to notice him, while the night hummed around us, thick and waiting. I could feel his gaze, bare, heavy, suffocating, pressing down on us like the weight of the desert itself. Even when I tried not to look, I could feel it crawling across my skin. Finally, Mom broke the silence. That's enough, she said tightly, her voice low but firm. We climbed out of the pool, dripping and quiet. The night air clung to us, warm and electric. As we walked back toward room 17, I risked a glance over my shoulder. He was still there. Same spot, same posture, motionless, watching. Inside, Mom slid the lock, then latched the deadbolt. Don't worry, she said with a small, practiced smile. People are weird sometimes. Doesn't mean they're dangerous. But the tremor in her hand said otherwise. Sometime after 11, I woke to the sound of water running. The shower hissed behind the thin bathroom door. The fan buzzed, soft and steady, blending with the hum of the air conditioner. Caleb was sprawled beside me, one arm hanging off the bed, mouth open in sleep. The room smelled faintly of chlorine and motel soap. I couldn't fall back asleep, so I opened my notebook and began to doodle. Lazy circles, random words, little monsters with crooked teeth. The kind of nonsense you draw to keep from thinking too much. Then came the knock. 3 slow, deliberate taps. I froze. A man's voice followed, low, too calm. Housekeeping. My throat went dry. We already got towels, I called out, barely above a whisper. A pause. Then quieter now, just checking. You had a nice swim? The way he said it, and flat, deliberate, wasn't friendly. It wasn't even curious. It was a statement. A reminder. My blood went cold. The door handle turned once, twice, then stopped. Mom! I screamed. The bathroom door burst open. Mom flew out, dripping wet, wrapped in a towel. She slammed the deadbolt and pressed her shoulder against the door. Who's there? She demanded. Silence. Then came the sound of footsteps, slow and heavy, retreating down the walkway. We stood there, breathing hard, listening to every creak and hum. Mom's chest heaved like she couldn't pull in enough air. Finally, she whispered, "Pack up, now." No one argued. Caleb rubbed his eyes, groggy and scared. What's happening? We're leaving, she said, and that was all. While she threw things into bags, I watched her hands, trembling, fast, focused. She picked up the phone and dialed the front desk. A man answered, his voice thick with sleep. We don't have housekeeping at night, he said flatly. But someone was at our door. Mom snapped. Ma'am, maybe you imagined... She hung up before he could finish. By midnight, we were back in the car. The Camry's headlights cut across the empty parking lot. The neon sign flickered in the rearview mirror. Blue lantern, buzzing like a dying insect. And there beneath it stood the man. His figure outlined in pale red light, perfectly still, eyes fixed on us. Mom didn't speak. She just pressed her foot down. The tires crunched over gravel and the road swallowed us whole. The desert stretched out, black, endless, silent. Caleb fell asleep again, his head against my shoulder, breathing slow and steady. Mom kept both hands on the wheel, jaw clenched, her eyes locked on the road ahead. I wanted to ask if she was okay, but I already knew the answer. When we crossed into California, she finally spoke, barely audible over the engine. Some people, she said, they look at others like prey. You can't ever ignore that feeling when it hits you. Ever. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I just watched the rearview mirror, half expecting to see headlights or worse. a shape keeping pace behind us. I'm 39 now, living in Seattle with a husband and 2 kids. But every time we stop at a motel, I still check every lock. Twice. Sometimes 3 times. Mom passed in 2017. At her funeral, Caleb told me he'd driven through Yuma a few years back. "The Blue Lantern's gone," he said quietly. "Torn down. Cops said there were disappearances. Probably more than anyone knew." That night I dreamed of room 17, the rattle of the air conditioner, the flickering pool lights, that slow, deliberate knock. And then that voice whispering through the door, "You had a nice swim?" I woke drenched in sweat, heart pounding just like it had 27 years ago. There's a kind of innocence that never returns once you've been afraid like that. Fear leaves a fingerprint. It doesn't fade. It just sinks deeper. Even now, whenever I drive past an old neon sign on a dark highway, I feel it again, that crawling awareness that someone, somewhere, might still be watching. Life teaches you that instinct isn't paranoia. It's protection. The world can be unpredictable, but that quiet voice inside, and the one that says, "Lock the door, leave sooner, trust your gut," it's there for a reason. Fear, when it comes from truth, isn't weakness. It's survival disguised as wisdom. It was late February 2019, and Colorado had settled into its cruel, bone-deep winter rhythm. The kind of cold that turns breath into smoke and makes the silence outside feel heavy, like it could crush you if you stood still too long. My name's Evan Mercer. I was 22 then, working the graveyard shift at the Starlight Motor Lodge for about 6 months. I wasn't supposed to stay that long. The job was meant to be a stopgap, something to keep my account from bleeding dry after I dropped out of college. But somehow the monotony grew comforting. There was a strange safety in routine. The low hum of the vending machine, the flickering lobby TV with its endless loop of late-night reruns, the bitter scent of old coffee brewing at 2 a.m. The Starlight sat alone on a forgotten stretch of highway, wedged between 2 empty fields, one littered with rusting trucks half swallowed by snow, the other a wasteland of dead grass bowing under a constant icy wind. Most nights were slow. A weary trucker looking for rest, a couple seeking privacy, or a road-worn traveler too tired to notice the peeling paint or the sputtering neon sign. Lately, though, something felt off. Rooms 5 through 9 were closed for renovation after a plumbing collapse, leaving me with nothing but the hum of fluorescent lights and the sound of the wind clawing at the windows. The night started like any other. I microwaved leftovers from dinner, skimmed through the guest registry, and texted my sister, "I'll quit soon, I promise." She sent back a thumbs-up emoji. At 1:47 a.m., the security monitor caught a flicker of movement in the parking lot, a shadow darting behind one of the concrete beams. I leaned in, squinting, nothing. Then, a motion light near room 2 blinked on, buzzing faintly in the cold. My stomach tightened. The registry said the room was empty. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped outside. The air bit through my jacket immediately. Snow crunched under my boots, each step echoing in the stillness. The lot was deserted. Only a half-buried soda can rolled lazily in the wind. I exhaled, watched my breath fog, and headed back in. The monitor flickered again. This time, a figure stood at the edge of the lot, a tall shape, face hidden beneath a zipped-up coat. My pulse jumped. I turned toward the window, nothing. When I looked back at the screen, the figure was gone. I called Mr. Clean, the property manager. Retired cop, grumpy as hell. "Probably a drifter," he muttered, voice thick with sleep. "Lock up, don't do anything stupid. I'll check it out in the morning." When the line went dead, I sat there for a while, trying to convince myself he was right. I opened a book, pretended to read, but my eyes kept darting to the monitor. Then a faint tap, tap, tap on the glass, metallic. I froze. Slowly, I looked up. A handprint, wet and fresh, was sliding down the lobby door. No footsteps outside, no shadow. Just that glistening smear of water against the glass. I locked the door, heart hammering. My fingers hovered over the silent emergency button, every nerve screaming. The lights flickered, buzzed, then dimmed. The landline crackled dead. My phone showed no service. That's when headlights swept across the lot, flooding the lobby with harsh white light. An old pickup truck idled just beyond the window. Relief hit until I realized the driver's seat was empty. The engine was running, but no one was inside. The passenger door creaked open, snow blowing in sideways. My throat went dry. Hello? My voice cracked in the frozen air. Only the motel's old swinging sign answered, its rusted chains groaning as the word vacancy squeaked back and forth in the wind. Then a sharp bang echoed from down the hall. Room 3, I froze. Footsteps followed, soft, dragging, uneven. No, I whispered, shaking my head. My pulse thundered in my ears. Still, I forced myself forward, flashlight trembling in my grip as I moved down the narrow corridor. The carpet squelched under my boots, damp and heavy. Footprints, wet, unfamiliar, led straight ahead. The door to room 3 was ajar, a weak light flickering from within. I pushed it open with the edge of my sleeve. The room was empty. An overturned chair, cigarette smoke hanging thick in the air like someone had just exhaled. Then the door slammed shut behind me. I shouted, a raw, startled sound that echoed strangely. The reverb bending my voice until it came back to me, warped, whispering the same word I'd just yelled. I spun around, flashlight beam shaking over peeling wallpaper and shadows that didn't belong. Nothing there. The emergency lights flashed crimson for a moment, then died, plunging everything into darkness. My heart lurched. I bolted for the lobby, the beam of my flashlight swinging wildly. The front door stood wide open, wind howling through it, shredding paper from the desk and scattering receipts like snowflakes. Across the lot, he was there again. The man in the coat, closer this time, watching. I dove behind the counter, breath coming in shallow bursts. My thumb hovered over the emergency button, but I hesitated. What if it didn't work? Boots crunched outside, slow, deliberate, circling, then silence. The power went out completely. The hum of the vending machine died, and the world seemed to inhale and hold its breath. The only light came from my trembling flashlight beam cutting through the dark. The handprint on the glass door was gone. In its place, a trail of wet footprints leading toward the back office. My heart hammered so hard it hurt. The office door was open. I ran. My boots slid on ice as I burst through the exit, lungs burning. By the time I reached the road, headlights appeared out of the snow. Relief crashed over me like a wave, Clean's truck. I waved frantically. Someone's in there. He climbed out, flashlight in hand, jaw set in a tired scowl. Together, we searched every room, every hallway, nothing, no footprints, no sign of a pickup. The air inside felt heavy and wrong. When we checked the monitors, the feed had stopped recording at 1:46 a.m., right before I'd first seen the figure. Cleaner rubbed his face and sighed. Happens more than you'd think. Wind, lights, mind playing tricks, but it wasn't tricks. I knew that. Something in that motel had seen me, recognized me, and whatever it wasn't human. Not entirely. I quit the next morning. Never went back for my paycheck. For weeks I couldn't sleep. Every creak in my Denver apartment made my pulse jump. Shadows moved where they shouldn't. Every motel I stayed in afterward felt alive, watching. I started to believe that noticing, really noticing, had invited something. 2 weeks later, the news broke. The Starlight Motor Lodge had burned down. Electrical fire, they said. But when firefighters cleared the debris, they found the lobby phone melted, receiver off the hook, and above the counter, faint, blackened into the wall, a single handprint. Same size, same shape. I didn't want to see it, didn't want to know. But once something touches your attention, it doesn't let go. Months passed. I moved into a smaller place. I avoided highways at night. Tried therapy. Nothing worked. The memory clung to me like frost that wouldn't melt. The motel had been a lesson. Pay attention. Trust your instincts. Fear is not your enemy, it's a warning. The world's small cracks, its shadows, its quiet anomalies, they aren't always imagination, even if people tell you they are. I carry that night with me still, a reminder that awareness comes with a cost. Some doors, once opened, even in thought, never close again. Sometimes I still catch sight of shadows in empty motel parking lots. Sometimes the wind carries the faint tap-tap of fingers on glass, and I remember noticing as part of being alive. But some things never let you unsee them. The rain had been relentless for 3 straight days, drumming against the windshield like a furious percussionist. Interstate 70 stretched ahead, a black ribbon swallowed by stormy gray, headlights smeared into ghostly streaks on the wet asphalt. I gripped the steering wheel tighter than I needed, knuckles whitening under the dim dashboard glow. Chicago had been suffocating. The apartment I once shared with my ex had become a mausoleum more than a home. Divorce papers sat on the kitchen counter, unsigned yet glaring at me every morning like silent judgment. My daughter Emma lived with her mother, and even the phone calls felt strained, like speaking through glass I couldn't quite penetrate. I wasn't entirely sure why I was leaving Chicago. Maybe it was the silence that pressed down like fog. Maybe it was the need to outrun the collapse of everything I'd known. The car carried me into Indiana, the rain hammering the roof like relentless drums. When the Redwood Pines motor inn finally emerged, I barely noticed its faded red doors or the flickering neon sign that buzzed weakly against the storm. The motel looked tired, abandoned even if technically still open. Inside, the clerk was a gaunt man with a nicotine-stained mustache. Without looking up, he slid me a key. Room 12. Try not to mind the folks next door. They've been here a while. I nodded automatically, too exhausted to ask questions. The room smelled of damp carpet and bleach. The air conditioner rattled and hissed like it wanted to escape. I kicked off my shoes, loosened my tie, and dialed Emma's number. No answer. "Love you, bug," I whispered into the dead line, voice tight, hollow. Hanging up, I sank into the bed, hoping sleep would swallow me whole. The storm outside made the walls feel closer, pressing in. Then came a bang, sharp and deliberate, from the wall of room 11. Voices rose. A man, rough, harsh. "I told you not to talk to him again, Vanessa." The woman's response was muffled, a trembling plea. "Bobby, please." Then glass shattered. A heavy thud reverberated through the adjoining wall. My chest froze. Part of me wanted to turn away, pretend it wasn't happening. Another part, the part that had always loathed helplessness, wanted to see. I cracked the door just slightly. Rain lashed the corridor. Room 11's door was ajar. A man's silhouette loomed inside. Broad shoulders, a neck tattoo barely visible through the shadows, something metallic in his hands. My heart stopped. "Bobby." He turned. I ducked instinctively. My fingers fumbled for the phone, front desk, no answer. One, dropped calls. The storm had taken half the cell towers with it. I stayed low, praying they wouldn't notice me until slow, deliberate knocks rapped at my door. "You watching, pal?" A voice taunted. A whisper followed from the vent above. "You're a salesman. Long drive alone." Both a man and woman laughed, soft and cruel. My pulse hammered in my ears. I zipped my suitcase, calculating escape versus discovery, and decided enough. Headlights sliced through the rain-streaked window. Two men approached, Bobby and another, a crowbar glinting wet under the flickering neon. I crouched behind the bed, thunder masking my movements. With a surge of panic, I wrenched open the bathroom window. Mud caked my shoes, water soaked my coat. I sprinted to my car, engine sputtering before roaring to life. Behind me, the neon sign flickered, a stuttering red warning. By the time I reached the truck stop 20 miles away, I was shaking uncontrollably. Police later confirmed my fear. Redwood Pines had been condemned months ago. Robert Hale and Vanessa Cole had died in room 11 the previous May. I never drove that route again. But even in Chicago, when rain drums against the windows like the night's percussion, I hear that muffled thud through the walls, as if Bobby never left. Before that night, my life had been ordinary on the surface. I worked for a medical supply company, driving hundreds of miles each week, selling equipment to hospitals and clinics. The travel kept me distracted, a necessary escape from my failed marriage and the quiet despair that settled like dust in my apartment. Chicago had been beautiful once. The skyline etched in winter fog, Lake Michigan stretching silver under muted sun, neighborhood diners with endless coffee refills. Now those images felt distant, fragile, like a life that had been quietly dismantled while I slept. But now every street I drove felt like a reminder of loss, like the asphalt itself was stitched with memories I couldn't escape. I had met Elise in college, sharp, quick-witted, fiercely independent. Our daughter, Emma, had been everything we'd dreamed of until arguments about money, career, and our future splintered the fragile foundation we'd built. The divorce was brutal in its quiet, insidious way. No screaming matches, no drawn-out court battles, just emptiness, missed calls, and the relentless ticking of clocks in a hollow apartment. So I drove. Sometimes to Cleveland, sometimes Indianapolis, anywhere that put the road between me and what I'd left behind. When I stumbled upon the Redwood Pines Motor Inn, it promised anonymity, a pause from the world. I didn't expect it to feel alive, to breathe, to push back against me in ways I couldn't rationalize. I kept replaying that night over and over. The storm, the knocks, the vent, the whispering voices. I told myself it was stress, sleep deprivation, paranoia born from exhaustion. Yet my hands shook every time I drove through rural Indiana afterward. Shadows seemed to creep in the periphery, and every small sound, a crow cawing, a creaking branch, felt amplified, sinister. I couldn't tell anyone. Friends would laugh, cops would shrug it off. The motel didn't exist anymore. The fire in room 11 had erased every trace. And yet, when I stayed in hotels afterward, I checked the walls, the vents, the rooms next door. Always. Convincing myself someone, or something, was still there, waiting. Sleep became a battleground. I avoided motels, stopped answering calls. Every time rain hit the windshield, I felt that night pressing down. A weight reminding me that escape is never clean. I started taking longer routes, avoiding interstates. But somehow the road always led me back to small towns, forgotten highways, and empty buildings with histories I wasn't meant to know. Once, in rural Kentucky, I pulled into a diner. Old neon buzzed overhead. I ordered black coffee and stared out at the slick asphalt. A man at the counter mentioned the fire at Redwood Pines casually, as if discussing a sports score. But the details, the names, the rooms made my stomach twist. Robert Hale and Vanessa Cole, he said. Terrible accident. Poor kids. I wanted to tell him I had been there, seen it, felt it, but I swallowed the words. No one would believe me. Even now I check motels from the street. Half glimpses of flickering signs, doors slightly ajar, cracked windows. I drive past quickly, but the hairs on my neck rise anyway. Being seen even briefly changes the rules. It makes the hidden things visible. The more I tried to rationalize, the less sense it made. Rain drumming on windows, flickering lights, whispers through vents. Everything should have been explainable, but it obeyed a cruel, deliberate logic. Room 11 had a story, a weight, a history that refused to let me forget. Months later, curiosity or compulsion drew me back near the old motel in Evansville. Rain had stopped. Nature was reclaiming the building. Faded letters barely spelled out "Red Wind." I walked the perimeter, peering at boarded windows. Nothing stirred. Nothing moved. And yet I could almost hear it. The thud of bodies against walls, whispers behind vents, the laughter of people who no longer existed. Some things don't end when fire, demolition, or time consumes them. They linger in perception, in memory, and fear. Room 11 had left a mark on me that sunlight and distance could not erase. Eventually, I returned to Chicago, forced to confront my life again. I learned to live with fear, to accept it as a passenger in the seat beside me. Trying to outrun the past, the fire, the storm, the night I barely escaped was futile. The lesson wasn't about ghosts or haunted motels. It was about awareness. Some places, some decisions, some people leave impressions you carry forever. Rain still terrifies me. Every darkened room, every vent, every storm drags me back to that night. I've learned to live with it because fear is not the absence of life. It is a reminder that life is fragile, unpredictable, and fleeting. And maybe that's the lesson. Pay attention to your surroundings. Don't ignore danger. Don't ignore instinct. Respect the past because some things, once they touch you, never leave. Life is fragile. The choices we make, the places we go, the people we trust, the details we notice, they leave marks that cannot always be erased. Fear is not punishment, it is signal. And facing it with awareness, respecting both past and present is the only way to keep moving forward. It was September 2015, early fall in Flint, Michigan, when the air carried that crisp tang of rotting leaves and the first whisper of cold. The kind of air that made the city feel smaller, heavier. College life felt like it was pressing in from every direction then. Endless lectures, greasy takeout, and the hum of fluorescent lights that made even the good days feel sterile. I was 20, a sophomore juggling classes, a part-time job, and the faint illusion of a social life. Liam, Harper, and Ethan, my roommates, had been restless for weeks. They wanted something real, something that didn't taste like cheap beer or sound like another argument in the dorm hall. "A story," Liam said one night. Something to tell when this place is just a blur. And then he found it. Brennan Pines Motel. A shuttered roadside relic from the late 90s, abandoned after a fire gutted half the structure in 2000. The online forums he trawled through were filled with conflicting stories, part ghost tale, part urban exploration myth. Some said it was haunted, others claimed it was condemned and forgotten. It was only 30 minutes from campus, just beyond Flint's rusted industrial sprawl and fields that used to hum with the sound of machinery. By the time we drove up, the night had settled deep and heavy. The air was cool, smelling faintly of damp soil and old smoke. The motel's neon sign still buzzed weakly, flickering in fractured reds and blues, the letters so broken they barely spelled Brennan. The parking lot was cracked and uneven, weeds forcing their way through the concrete like desperate fingers. A rusted chain-link fence surrounded the property, warped and bent in places. Liam found a gap near the back. "Seriously, are we doing this?" Harper asked, pulling her jacket tight around her shoulders. Her flashlight shook a little, the beam jittering against the dark. "It's just an empty building," I said, trying to sound casual, though the words came out thinner than I'd intended. Liam grinned, teeth flashing in the half-light. "Exactly, empty. We take a few pictures, tell a few lies about ghosts later, and go home." We slipped through the fence. Inside, the lobby was a tomb. Dust hung in the air like smoke, thick and slow, glittering when our flashlights passed through it. The scent hit us immediately. Mildew, wet carpet, something faintly sweet like decaying flowers. Broken chairs were stacked in the corner, their legs jutting out like broken bones. Papers littered the floor. Invoices, guest ledgers from 1998, curling at the edges. "It smells like time died in here," Harper muttered. "Or someone forgot to bury it," Ethan said under his breath. We laughed, too loudly, the sound hollow in the empty space. The quiet afterward felt wrong, the kind that hums in your ears and makes you aware of your own breathing. We climbed the stairwell carefully. Every step groaned beneath us. The catwalks on the second floor were worse, boards missing in places, the drop below a dizzying 40 feet to the lobby. Harper dared us to cross the narrow section near the railing. Liam went first, grinning like a fool, but his foot slipped on the warped wood. The flashlight spun from his hand, clattering toward the edge. My heart lurched, but I caught it just in time. My palms were slick with sweat. Upstairs, the offices looked like something sealed off mid-breath. Rusted filing cabinets, papers scattered like fallen leaves, yellowed Polaroids of guests whose faces had faded into white ghosts. A single computer sat in the corner, its monitor coated in a film of dust. "Creepy as hell," Ethan murmured, sweeping his light down the hall. The beam caught a flicker of movement, a shadow shifting at the far end. He stiffened. "Did you see that?" Before we could answer, a loud crack echoed above us. Liam's foot caught on a tilted board. He pitched sideways with a shout, arms flailing. Instinct took over. I lunged, grabbed his wrist, Harper grabbed mine, and for one terrifying second, he dangled over the empty air before we pulled him back up. And that's when we saw him. A man, maybe in his 50s, wearing a faded security uniform, standing perfectly still on the opposite catwalk watching. His expression was unreadable. His flashlight was dead, yet somehow we could see his eyes in the dark. "Move," I whispered. We did. Slow, deliberate steps, every board creaking like a warning. The man didn't follow, not at first. Then he moved, a few paces closer, just enough for the light to catch the faint shine of his badge. And then just as we reached the door, he gave a single nod, almost approving. Then he was gone. We didn't speak until we were outside, gasping cold air like it might wash something off us. The neon sign buzzed faintly behind us, letters flickering in red and blue as if the motel were breathing, watching. That night, I couldn't shake the feeling that we hadn't left it behind. By mid-October, Brennan Pines still lived in the back of my mind. The creak of wood, the man's eyes, the silence. We went back once more, this time with gloves, better flashlights, and the kind of caution that only comes from surviving something you can't quite explain. Harper insisted she wanted better shots of the lobby. "I didn't get the lighting right last time," she said, adjusting her camera strap with a shaky hand. Ethan was determined to check out the old kitchen. If the rumors are true, they left everything after the fire, he said, curiosity glinting behind his glasses. Liam, still limping slightly from his bruised ribs, smirked like he had something to prove. I'm fine. Just don't expect me to do any gymnastics this time. I tagged along, my gut knotted between fascination and dread. The deeper we went, the worse it smelled. Mildew, wet carpet, rust, and something faintly metallic like old blood. The main hallway stretched before us, claustrophobic and echoing. Graffiti crawled across the walls, names, slurs, crude symbols. The carpet was riddled with cigarette burns and water stains that looked like spreading bruises. Some rooms had been gutted, furniture scavenged, wallpaper peeling in long curling strips, shards of glass crunching under our shoes. Others felt eerily preserved. Beds made, curtains still drawn, a half-empty water bottle on a dresser, its plastic cloudy with age. It was too easy to imagine someone sleeping there just yesterday instead of 15 years ago. Creepy how normal some of this looks, Harper whispered. Yeah, Ethan said, like time just stopped caring. We kept our voices low, not wanting to startle anything or anyone that might still linger. The building swallowed our whispers, leaving only the sound of our footsteps and the steady drip of water somewhere unseen. It wasn't until we reached the back stairwell that I noticed something wrong. The boards beneath my shoes had a hollow sound, different from before, like something had shifted underneath. Liam stepped ahead, his flashlight sweeping across the dark corridor. That's when a shadow darted past the beam, fast, deliberate. Too quick to be imagined. Ethan's breath hitched. Did you see that? Don't, Harper's voice trembled. She grabbed my arm. Don't look too long. Just keep moving. We did, inching forward through the silence, pretending not to notice the way our lights seemed weaker now. The shadow was gone, but its absence felt heavier than its presence. The air itself seemed alive, like the motel was exhaling, watching, waiting for one of us to falter. We found ourselves back on the second-floor catwalk, the same place where Liam had nearly fallen weeks before. You've got to be kidding me, he muttered, rubbing his shoulder. Not this again. The boards creaked under every step, groaning like something buried deep in the wood wanted out. That's when I saw him. The man in the faded security uniform. He stood at the far end of the hall, motionless as if he'd been there all along. His face was obscured by shadow, but I could feel his gaze, heavy, focused, like he could see through the skin, through the breath, straight into us. Do we leave? I whispered. Harper didn't move. Her camera hung uselessly from her neck, lens pointed at the floor. Liam froze mid-step, every muscle tight. The man didn't speak, didn't blink. My pulse roared in my ears. The boards beneath me flexed with a soft, protesting moan. One wrong shift of weight and they'd give way. I took another careful step. Then another. We moved slowly, deliberate, every breath timed with every creak. It felt like walking a tightrope stretched over something unseen and endless. The man stayed where he was until we reached the stairwell. Then he moved. Not forward, but sideways, dissolving into the dark like smoke. By the time our feet hit solid concrete, he was gone. Outside, the cold slapped our faces. We stood in silence, shivering, not just from the wind, but from the understanding that something had seen us in there. The motel loomed behind, its shattered windows glinting faintly in the moonlight like open eyes. Over the following weeks, none of us could stop thinking about Brennan Pines. Every conversation circled back to it. The smell of rot, the creak of the floors, the shadow, the man. We all remembered it the same way. Too vividly, too consistently. I started to realize that the motel wasn't just a ruin. It was memory made physical, a place built from every mistake, secret, and echo left inside it. We hadn't just trespassed on abandoned property. We'd stepped into a story still being written, and somehow it had noticed. We never went back. The thrill had curdled into something heavier, an awareness that curiosity has teeth. Some places aren't meant to be uncovered. Some stories aren't waiting to be told. Even now, years later, when I pass an empty motel on a desolate road, or hear the wind rattle through broken windows, I feel it again, that quiet, patient presence. And I remember that night in Flint, when we learned that curiosity isn't free. It demands something in return. Sometimes what it takes is a part of you that never quite comes back. I never paid much attention to small towns, until one late November found me driving through one, the Montana sky a flat, unforgiving gray above a road that seemed to stretch forever. The air cut sharply through my jacket, biting my fingers even as I gripped the steering wheel tighter, trying to ignore it. I was Clara Bennett, 23, a graduate student on the verge of finishing my senior thesis, convinced I could handle long stretches of isolation. My mother, naturally, did not share this confidence. She'd called twice before I left Billings, her voice trembling slightly as she insisted I check in with someone while working alone. "Mom, it's just a motel," I said, trying for lightness. "I've stayed alone before. Remember the cabins?" There was a long sigh on the other end. I ignored it. Work waited. Cedar Hollow Motel appeared off the roadside like a relic from a different time. Its neon vacancy sign flickered with uneven pulses, half-burned letters buzzing faintly in the wind. Small, aged and stubbornly standing in the empty stretch of highway, it was exactly the sort of place writers and loners tended to gravitate toward. I parked beside room 7, hoisted my duffel, and pushed open the creaky glass door. Henry, the front desk clerk, hunched behind the counter under dim fluorescent lights. His frame was thin, almost fragile, and a faint trace of cigarette smoke clung to him. His smile was polite but rehearsed, like one he had practiced in front of a mirror. "Evening," he said, handing me a brass key. "Room 7, top floor." "Thanks," I murmured, forcing calm. There was something in the way his eyes lingered, an odd heaviness that made my skin crawl. I blamed it on the long drive. Room 7 smelled of mothballs and aged carpet, and the heater rattled in uneven, discordant beats. I set up my laptop, opening my thesis folder, but the silence of the motel pressed in on me, making every creak and groan of the building feel amplified. Around 11:30 p.m., footsteps crunched outside. My chest tightened. I froze, staring through the window. A man stood at the edge of the parking lot, his long coat blending with the dark pines beyond. He didn't move, didn't blink, he just watched. I reached for the phone to call Henry, but the line was dead. My cell signal flickered, barely one bar. Panic crept in, slow and insidious. I backed away from the window, whispering reassurances to myself that it was just someone passing through. But the footsteps returned, slower this time, deliberate, moving toward the lone tree by the motel. The glow of a cigarette illuminated part of his face, pale, expressionless, almost carved from stone. I grabbed the baseball bat from the trunk and sat near the door, waiting. Hours passed. The wind rattled the siding. The heater clanged unevenly, and he never left. When dawn finally bled across the horizon, the footsteps faded. My body trembled as I packed in silence. Henry was gone, and muddy footprints led from the side entrance toward the woods. The lobby phone rang suddenly, its shrill tone slicing the quiet. I answered, breath catching. "Hello?" Silence then, a faint, hollow chuckle that made my stomach flip. I hung up and left without looking back. Weeks later, I discovered that Cedar Hollow Motel carried a long history of trespassers and disappearances. Nobody ever got caught. I tell myself the man was a drifter, a voyeur, but even in my quiet apartment in Billings, I sometimes feel the same unblinking gaze, as if someone is lingering just beyond the window. Watching, I return to Cedar Hollow only in nightmares. The memory of his stare haunted me. The crunch of gravel, the cigarette's pale glow, the faint mocking chuckle. I couldn't explain why the memory clawed at me, but the more I tried to ignore it, the sharper it became. A few weeks later, I had to return for another research trip. Rationally, daylight should have made the motel safe, but unease returned the moment I walked in. Henry was there, but his smile seemed tighter now, more controlled. He handed me the key silently, eyes lingering just a moment too long. That night, I unpacked my laptop and tried to focus on work. But by 10 p.m., the wind had picked up, rattling the window frames like tiny warning bells. I heard footsteps in the hallway outside room 7. Slow, deliberate, dragging across the thin carpet. My pulse kicked up, quick and shallow. I pressed an ear to the door, straining to listen. The sound stopped. Holding my breath, I leaned toward the peephole. Nothing. The hallway was empty, the fluorescent light above flickering with a weak, intermittent buzz. "Get a grip, Clara," I muttered to myself, forcing a shaky laugh as I turned back toward my desk. I tried to focus on my laptop screen, but the heater's uneven clank and the groan of the floorboards made every second feel louder, heavier. Then the footsteps came again, closer this time. They stopped right outside my door. My throat tightened. I grabbed the baseball bat from beside the bed, fingers slick with sweat. A knock. 3 soft, deliberate taps. "Hello," I called, barely above a whisper. "Who's there?" No answer. The knocking resumed, slow, patient, as if whoever was out there had all the time in the world. I backed away, the bat trembling in my grip. I didn't sleep that night. My muscles locked tight, every sound magnified, the wind whispering under the door, the heater clanging like distant footsteps, my heartbeat echoing in my ears. Something inside me screamed that I was not alone. By morning, silence. The hallway empty again. Only a small smear of mud marked the bottom of my door. Henry wasn't at the front desk. I didn't even bother checking out. I just left, hands trembling on the steering wheel, the feeling of being hunted clinging to my skin. Even back in the crowded streets of Billings, that sense of being watched wouldn't fade. Sometimes when I heard footsteps behind me, I'd quicken my pace, pulse spiking until I saw no one there. Months passed. I moved into a larger apartment with stronger locks, better lighting, and neighbors on both sides. I promised myself never to travel alone again. I told everyone Cedar Hollow was just a bad dream. Then one evening, an email arrived. "You saw me. I saw you. Don't forget." My blood ran cold. The sender was a burner account. No name, no traceable address, nothing. I told myself it was a sick joke. Maybe some troll who found my name online. But the memory of that pale face in the dark parking lot came rushing back. The unblinking stare, the cigarette glow, the stillness. A week later, working late in the campus library, I felt it again. The unmistakable prickle of eyes on me. My pulse quickened. Every shadow in the corner of my vision seemed to twitch, stretch, move. I turned toward the window, and for a split second I swore I saw a silhouette standing outside. I blinked. It was gone. Sleep became a stranger after that. I started checking the locks twice, leaving lights on through the night, avoiding empty rooms and quiet corridors. Even in crowds I could feel it, the weight of a gaze that didn't belong. Finally, 6 months later, I decided to go back. I told myself I needed closure. That fear could only control me if I let it. Cedar Hollow waited, unchanged. The same flickering neon sign, the same heavy silence pressing against the glass. Henry stood behind the counter again, his expression blank. When I asked about room 7, his lips twitched into something almost like a smirk. "No one stayed there in months," he said quietly. "Most people avoid it." "I'd like to see it," I said before I could lose my nerve. The door creaked as I stepped inside. The air smelled exactly as I remembered. Old carpet, mothballs, faint cigarette smoke clinging to the curtains. I crossed to the window and looked out into the dark parking lot. Nothing moved. The silence felt heavier than before. Then something shifted at the edge of the tree line, a flicker of movement. My heart skipped. A whisper brushed through the room, low and cold, curling around my ear. "You can't run." I spun around. Empty space. Just the faint hum of the heater. My breath came fast, my palms slick against the bat I hadn't realized I'd picked up. Standing there, surrounded by the ghosts of my own fear, I realized something. Whatever haunted me might not live in the motel anymore. It lived in me. Still, the instinct to flee was overpowering. I bolted, driving away faster than I ever had before, headlights slicing through the gray dawn. I never went back. Cedar Hollow became a scar in my memory, a lesson written in dread and adrenaline. Back in Billings, I forced myself to rebuild. I finished my thesis, found a steady job, made myself believe in normal again. But sometimes, late at night, when the wind rattles the window and the shadows stretch too long across the room, I feel it, the faint chill of eyes on my back. That's when I understand. Fear isn't weakness, it's warning. We like to believe we can reason our way out of danger, out of instinct. But the mind is both protector and betrayer. Cedar Hollow taught me that vigilance isn't paranoia, it's survival. The world isn't always cruel, but it's never as empty as it seems. I remember that heavy, airless March afternoon in Kerala. as if it were pressed into my memory with heat and sweat. I was 15 then, Oliver Hughes, a lanky British kid on his first real trip abroad. The bus had just hissed to a stop, brakes groaning, and our little group of exchange students stumbled out into the thick green quiet. The jungle pressed in from all sides, swallowing sound and color until even the road behind us seemed to fade away. Mr. Varma, our guide, waved us toward a place he called the Jungle Edge Motel. I'd imagined something quaint, a rustic rest stop with carved shutters and the smell of spiced tea. But when we saw it, my stomach tightened. The motel crouched behind overgrown vines, half smothered by the forest. Its paint was the color of rot, windows cracked like spiderwebs. The sign above the porch swung with every sluggish gust of wind, letting out a thin, high-pitched squeal that made my teeth ache. No other travelers. No parked vehicles. Just silence. The staff appeared slowly, as if conjured by our arrival. Pale faces, quiet feet, their eyes strangely dull and watchful. They moved with a stiffness that made conversation feel unwelcome. The man who greeted us, tall and angular with a hooked nose and eyes sharp as obsidian, didn't smile. He merely handed out room keys one by one, murmuring numbers in a voice too soft to carry. When I entered my room, the air changed. Even in that oppressive heat, the space felt cold, almost airless. It was barren, just a single narrow bed, a scuffed nightstand, and a dull mirror that warped my reflection. On the dresser sat a small metal horse polished to a glassy sheen. Its head was tilted slightly, as if caught mid-turn. For reasons I couldn't explain, I couldn't stop looking at it. It seemed aware. The room smelled faintly of damp and mildew, and the bathroom tiles were cracked and gray with age. I unpacked to keep busy, scribbled a few sentences in my journal, something about new sights, odd energy, and lay down. But sleep wouldn't come. Every creak from the floorboards, every sigh of wind through the shutters set my nerves on edge. My gaze kept flicking to the figurine, waiting for it to twitch. At 1:15 a.m., I woke to a soft click, the sound of my door latch moving. My breath caught. Someone had opened it. I sat up slowly, listening. Nothing. But the air felt disturbed, alive. My luggage, neatly zipped earlier, had been shifted. Nothing missing, but someone had touched it. My eyes darted toward the dresser. The horse was no longer facing the mirror. It had turned, now staring directly at the door. A prickling chill spread through my skin. "Hello?" I whispered, but my voice broke in the stillness. No answer. I thought about knocking on the adjoining wall, calling out to the others, but fear rooted me in place. The jungle hummed outside. Somewhere in the darkness, something moved. When dawn finally came, the unease didn't lift. Over breakfast, flat chapati and bitter coffee, the group was quieter than usual. The air smelled faintly of smoke. Then I saw it. In the lounge near the back porch, several pieces of furniture had been reduced to blackened splinters, the floor streaked with ash. Mr. Varma frowned but said nothing. Our driver, Raju, refused to eat. "Funny business here," he muttered, shaking his head, his hands trembling slightly. "Bad place." I tried to laugh, but my voice sounded wrong. I opened my travel folder to check my documents just to reassure myself and froze. One of my passport photos was gone. I flipped the pages again, frantic. Gone. It hadn't fallen out. I knew it hadn't. My stomach turned cold. Someone had been in my room. Someone who knew exactly what they were taking. By afternoon, the front desk was empty. Doors locked, lights flickering. The staff had vanished, though I caught glimpses of movement deep in the corridor, like shapes dissolving just as I turned my head. My fellow travelers grew uneasy too. Some whispered, others stared at the floor. Mr. Varma tried to sound calm, but I saw his hands twitch whenever the shadows shifted. He kept glancing toward the tree line as if expecting the forest itself to step closer. We began comparing notes over breakfast, each of us quietly testing the line between coincidence and something else. Harper from the next room mentioned hearing a whisper in the hallway. Soft, rhythmic, almost like chanting. Mr. Varma's nephew swore his door had creaked open in the night, though the latch was heavy. Someone else said they'd seen movement just beyond the edge of their vision, shapes that vanished when they turned their heads. No one laughed. No one said we were imagining it. The air itself felt complicit, thick with something unspoken and deliberate. By late afternoon, the tension had become suffocating. I sat in my room pretending to do homework, Pencil scratching across a blank page, my thoughts circling like trapped flies. Every noise outside, rustling leaves, snapping branches, the faint rhythm of footsteps that may not have been there, made my pulse surge. I couldn't escape the feeling that eyes were fixed on me from somewhere unseen. I finally stepped out to the back porch, desperate for air. That's when I saw it. The metal horse. The same figurine from my dresser now sat at the porch's edge, gleaming faintly in the wan sunlight, facing outward toward the jungle. Its position was too precise to be an accident. The sight hit me like a stone dropped into my stomach. Someone had moved it there. Someone wanted us to see it. The message was unmistakable. We see you. We control this place. I forced a nervous laugh, telling myself it must be a prank, some local ritual, something explainable. But the logic crumbled under the weight of my own dread. My instinct screamed that it was a warning. I clutched my phone like a lifeline, though the screen flickered weakly. No signal. When I asked Raju to call for help, he refused, eyes darting toward the tree line. "Better not," he said, voice low. "They don't like noise here." After that, the hallways felt different. Longer somehow, darker. Every doorway seemed to breathe. By nightfall, sleep was impossible. My imagination turned the ordinary into threats. The hiss of wind through cracked windows became whispers, the creak of my bed a cautious step, the fluttering curtains a hand reaching toward me. I lay frozen, muscles trembling, praying for dawn. When morning finally bled into the gray air, our decision came without words. We were done. Mr. Varma gathered us, and together we marched to the reception desk, prepared to demand answers. But the front office was padlocked. No sign of the staff. No sound but the jungle beyond. And there, in front of the door, sat the metal horse again, its metal surface catching the light, positioned just so, facing the road as though standing guard. I felt my throat tighten. It wasn't random. It was ritualistic. Someone wanted us gone. Fear finally broke through hesitation. "We're leaving," Mr. Varma said flatly, voice trembling. No one argued. We fled down the narrow jungle path, branches clawing at our arms, the sound of our hurried breaths blending with the cicadas' drone. Sweat slicked our backs despite the heat. Behind us, the jungle edge motel stood silent, half consumed by vines, an empty shell with eyes we could no longer see. I didn't look back. None of us did. For hours, as we drove toward civilization, I replayed everything in my head. The whispering halls, the burned furniture, the shifting luggage, the missing passport photo. All of it. Slowly, the pattern formed. It hadn't been random. We had wandered into someone's quiet, patient game, a trap for the curious. Back home in England, I tried to bury the memory, but it followed me. For years afterward, every creak of a floorboard, every door that clicked shut on its own made my skin crawl. I'd wake in the dark certain that something was standing just beyond the edge of sight watching. The memory of the motel had turned to a ghost that traveled with me. The metal horse became its symbol, a silent sentinel reminding me of the invisible lines we cross without meaning to. The experience taught me that not all dangers roar or reveal themselves. Some simply wait. Curiosity is a powerful instinct, but unchecked, it's perilous. The world is full of quiet predators, people, places, forces that observe, patient and unseen. I learned painfully that respect and awareness protect more than fear ever could. Silence, I realized, isn't always peace. Sometimes it's the sound of something watching you breathe. I've lived on the same street in Henderson, Nevada for the past 11 years. It's one of those places where nothing really happens. Just row after row of sun-bleached houses, cracked sidewalks, and the occasional block party when someone's kid graduates high school. I work nights as a security guard, so I usually sleep through the daytime drama. Still, I remember the day everything changed, like it was carved into my bones. 3 doors down from me lived a guy named Craig. He kept to himself. Always looked greasy, like he worked with oil in his sleep, and he rarely spoke unless you caught him near his garage and forced a conversation. People around here called him the wrench guy. He ran a makeshift auto shop out of his house. No sign, no name, no business hours. But everyone knew Craig could fix your car for cheap. I took my old Honda Civic to him once when it was leaking something nasty, and he patched it up without asking for a dime. Just waved me off with an absent grunt. He had this hollow look in his eyes, like sleep was something other people got, and he'd say weird things under his breath while he worked. Things like, "The world's too noisy." He lived alone. His wife had left him years ago. I only knew that because Tammy, my neighbor across the street, has a way of dropping other people's private tragedies into conversation, like she's giving you a weather report. Apparently, the wife just vanished one morning. No moving truck, no tearful goodbyes. She was just gone. Tammy said, "Divorce wasn't pretty. She left him cold, just up and disappeared." Some folks joked, half laughing, half not, that Craig had locked her in the basement or buried her under the garage. But no one ever said it like they really wanted an answer. About 3 months before things got weird, the HOA finally clamped down on Craig's operation. They'd been gunning for him for years, but someone, I'm guessing the guy with the new Tesla, filed a formal complaint about the fumes and the noise. One morning, there was a laminated letter duct-taped to Craig's rusted chain-link fence. Immediate cease of operation. In bold red letters. I passed by the next day and saw him sitting in a lawn chair in his driveway, just staring at the closed garage door, not moving, not even blinking. He looked like a man watching his house burn from the inside out. That was the last time I saw him in daylight. After that, the garage door stayed shut. No more engine revs, no more scattered parts in the yard. Just silence. And not the peaceful kind. It was the kind of silence that felt wrong, like something was being held in. A few weeks passed. People moved on. Craig had always been background noise in our little suburban life. But then, one morning, right before my shift, I stepped outside and stopped cold. There was a smell in the air. Not smoke, not gas. Something harsher. It hit the back of your throat like burning plastic mixed with nail polish remover. Chemical, artificial, wrong. I wasn't the only one who noticed. Neighbors were standing in their yards sniffing the air, exchanging uneasy glances. That's when I heard it. The sound. It was faint. You had to really focus to hear it. A low, steady humming, like a refrigerator running, but heavier. Almost rhythmic, like it had a pulse. It was coming from Craig's house. Tammy was already on her phone. That's when I knew it wasn't nothing. Tammy only calls for 2 reasons: neighborhood gossip or emergencies. By the time I left for work around 7 p.m., 2 fire trucks and a police SUV had parked in front of Craig's place. I slowed my car near the end of the block to watch. They hadn't gone inside yet. There was yellow caution tape going up, and one of the firefighters had a hazmat mask hanging from his neck. That was my first real clue that this wasn't a wiring issue or a kitchen fire. That humming. It was louder now. Heavy. It wasn't just a sound anymore, it had weight, like it was pressing into your chest. I remember putting my hand to the steering wheel and feeling it vibrate under my fingers. A few neighbors had their phones out, filming from a distance, but no one got close. Nobody wanted to. I drove off, not knowing that would be the last time anyone ever saw Craig. At work, I couldn't concentrate. I kept refreshing the local news on my phone, hoping for some update, but there was nothing. Just a short blurb. Possible chemical hazard under investigation in Henderson residential area. That was it. Around midnight, I finally got a text from Tammy. Just one sentence. They broke down the garage door. No details, no follow-up. Just that. I texted Tammy back asking what they'd found, but she didn't reply, not until the next morning. When I got home, the entire street was locked down. Fire department vans, unmarked black trucks, even a bomb squad vehicle blocking both ends of the block. I had to park 3 streets over and walk the rest of the way. My heart was hammering. Something was seriously wrong. Later that day, everything came out. Apparently, Craig had been building some kind of detonation system inside his house. Not just a homemade explosive in a basement kind of thing. This was complex, connected to multiple gas lines running up and down the entire street. It wasn't just dangerous, it was devastating. They said if it had gone off the way he planned, half the neighborhood would have been obliterated. But it didn't. The ignition system failed. Some jerry-rigged timing mechanism jammed at the last second. Dumb luck or divine intervention? Take your pick. That afternoon, I stood on my porch with a few other neighbors, all of us in stunned silence, watching as a man in a black jacket wheeled out what looked like a half-melted machine on a gurney. Wires everywhere, scorched metal. The thing looked like it had been part of a movie set. I stepped forward and asked one of the officers quietly, "Did you find Craig?" The guy didn't even look at me, just shook his head and muttered, "We haven't located the homeowner yet." That part still keeps me up sometimes. Craig's car was there. His front door was locked from the inside. No broken windows, no sign of forced entry or exit. No blood, no body, no note. Just that machine, a bunch of tangled wires, and a house filled with tools and chemical drums. It was like he'd disappeared in the middle of setting it all up. Some people think he fled before the authorities arrived, but how? I live 3 houses down. If he slipped out, I would have seen or heard something. Others think he planned to go out with the explosion, that it was a suicide mission, but he lost his nerve at the last second. Me? I'm not so sure he ever planned to leave that garage. I think something happened in there, something that made him stop or vanish. For weeks after that, our street felt wrong. Not in the supernatural way. It was real, physical, like the air itself was heavier. Sleep didn't come easy. The silence at night didn't feel restful. It felt loaded. The city sealed off Craig's house, metal panels over the windows and doors, the garage gutted, completely emptied. Rumor was that inside they found the insulation ripped from the walls, electrical wiring yanked out, sheetrock stripped to the studs, and notes, dozens of them, taped everywhere, handwritten, scrawled in pen and marker, illegible in parts. Tammy said they looked like someone trying to map something out. Others said Craig was convinced someone was watching him through the power lines, that he thought the grid was alive. Some claimed he was building a signal jammer to block voices only he could hear. It sounded insane, but no one could deny how deliberate everything had been. This wasn't the ramblings of a man falling apart. It was a plan, a blueprint, and it almost worked. 2 weeks later, I was out walking my dog late at night. I don't know why I passed Craig's place. Curiosity, I guess. Maybe I wanted to prove to myself that nothing was left, that it was just a house again. The metal panels were still up. The streetlight in front flickered, casting long, jerky shadows across the pavement. Then my dog froze, ears up, hackles raised, low growl rumbling in her throat. That's when I heard it, that sound, that same low humming vibration from before. Fainter this time, but still there. So quiet you'd think it was your imagination, unless you'd heard it before. And I had. I stood there, not moving, barely breathing. It was lower than before, deeper, like it wasn't coming from the house anymore, but beneath it, like it had sunk into the foundation, into the earth. I tugged the leash hard and walked away fast. My skin crawled the entire way home. I didn't sleep that night. Eventually, the city brought in engineers to clear the place out entirely. The official explanation was residual electrical interference from old equipment, a plausible enough story. But no one explained why Craig was never found. No surveillance footage of him leaving, his bank account untouched, no phone activity, no credit card usage, no fingerprints anywhere unusual. Just gone, like he dissolved into the concrete. Some families moved out not long after. The rest of us just stopped talking about it. Like if we ignored it long enough, the street would go back to normal. Like silence could smother the unease. But not for me. I still think about it. Every night when I drive past that house. The lawn's overgrown now. The panels are still up. And sometimes people say they hear it. That hum. Just for a second. A vibration at the edge of hearing, like something breathing under the floor. Last week, a real estate company finally listed the property online. Didn't mention a thing about what happened. Just called it a great fixer-upper opportunity with a spacious garage, perfect for creative projects. I stared at the listing for a long time. I don't believe in ghosts, or demons, or monsters in closets, but I believe in obsession, in ideas that sink their claws into a person and don't let go. And something tells me that house isn't done yet. Whatever Craig was building, or trying to stop, is still in there, humming softly beneath the concrete, waiting, watching. And the scariest part? I don't think we'll ever find out what it really was, but someone will, and when they do, it won't end well. I moved into that condo last fall, a 2-bedroom just outside Phoenix. I was 36, recently divorced, and trying to piece my life back together without draining the last of my savings. The building was older, built in the late 80s, I think. You could hear everything through the walls. Coughs, toilets flushing, dogs barking. I figured that was just the trade-off for cheap rent in a decent neighborhood. I didn't know many of my neighbors. People mostly kept to themselves. The guy next door barely even made eye contact. I only heard his name once, Josh, I think, when the landlord mentioned him in passing. He was tall, maybe mid-30s, usually wore a baseball cap. That was all I really knew about him. From the first week, though, I started hearing strange noises coming from his side of the wall. At first, I thought it was just the old plumbing, muffled bangs, maybe pipes clanking. Sometimes there was this dragging sound, like furniture being scraped across the floor, and every now and then what sounded like someone crying, but I kept brushing it off. Maybe it was just a TV playing late, or someone dealing with a breakup. This building creaked constantly at night. It was easy to rationalize things when all you wanted was some sleep and peace of mind. I even remember one night, I paused my show, muted the volume just to listen. But the sound stopped. I think I actually laughed at myself. It's strange how good we get at convincing ourselves everything's normal when we need it to be. Then came the night I couldn't ignore it. It was around 10:30 p.m. I was on the couch, scrolling through my phone when I heard a loud thump, sharp, sudden. Not like something fell. It sounded like an impact. A body hitting the wall. Then nothing. Just silence. I sat there, frozen, staring at the wall. Maybe a minute passed, and then I heard it. A woman's voice yelling, not crying, not muffled, screaming. "Please help me, somebody help." It was so loud it cut right through the drywall. My chest clenched. For a second I didn't move. My brain struggled to catch up with what I'd just heard. Then I shot up, grabbed my phone, and dialed 911 with shaking hands. I barely remember what I told them, just that someone was in danger next door, that I'd heard a woman screaming for help. When the cops arrived, I met them in the hallway, still in my sweatpants, heart hammering in my chest. I repeated what I'd heard. They knocked. No response. One of them tried the door. Locked. He radioed for backup, while the other started calling the building's maintenance line, hoping someone could come unlock it. From inside, I could hear movement. Something shifting. I said again. She was screaming. She said someone help her. One of the officers just muttered, "Screw it," and started kicking the door. It took 3, maybe 4 solid hits before it flew open. And the sound that came from inside, I'll never forget it. It wasn't screaming. It wasn't chaos. It was the absence of all that. Just silence. The kind that makes your skin crawl. Boots shuffled on the floor. One officer called out, "Ma'am, are you okay?" I couldn't see much from where I stood, just a narrow sliver through the door. But they were inside for a while before they brought her out. She looked like a ghost, pale, thin, her eyes hollow like she hadn't slept in days. She wore a tank top and pajama pants, no shoes, zip ties still loose around her wrists. Her hands trembled as they led her out. She looked at me, no, through me, like I wasn't even real, like she was still somewhere else entirely. That look, God, I'll never forget it. It was the kind of look someone has when they've seen something they can't unsee, when they've survived something that should have broken them. One of the officers gently placed his hand on her back, guiding her out. Another ran to the squad car and came back with a blanket, wrapping it around her shoulders. She kept whispering something under her breath, repeating it over and over. But I couldn't make out the words. The cops didn't let me go back inside right away. I had to stay out in the hallway while they asked me questions. I told them everything I could, which wasn't much. Just the things I'd heard that night and the weird sounds over the past few weeks. I remember my voice trembling as I described it, still trying to process what had just happened. That's when one of the officers said something that hit me like a punch to the chest. She told us she's been in there for 3 weeks. 3 weeks. That wall I'd been sleeping next to every single night. A woman had been behind it, tied up, trapped, held hostage by that guy, Josh, or whatever his real name was. Apparently he'd told a few neighbors she was out of town visiting family or on vacation. Meanwhile, he had her chained to a metal bed frame with blackout curtains covering the windows so no one could see in. That scream I heard that night. It was her last attempt. Her final push. She told the cops she didn't think she'd survive another night. Inside, they found empty water bottles and fast food wrappers littering the floor. No lights on. No furniture except the bed frame and an old chair. He'd taken her phone, shut off her access to everything. No way to call for help. No way out. What made it even more disturbing was what they pieced together after. He was leaving during the day and only coming back at night. Like it was some kind of twisted routine. A life he was living alongside the horror he was inflicting on her. Like it was normal. They arrested him not long after. He got pulled over a few hours later trying to leave town. I didn't even see it happen. One of the neighbors filled me in the next day. But the part that's haunted me the most? It's how normal he seemed. Just a quiet guy with a backwards cap who barely spoke. Nothing threatening, nothing suspicious. And if I hadn't called, I still think about that all the time. That night I didn't sleep. I couldn't. I just sat on the edge of my bed staring at the wall, the same one she'd been behind, trying to understand how something so horrific could have been happening that close without me realizing. My stomach turned. I felt physically ill. Then came the guilt. The heavy kind. The kind that sticks to you and plays back everything you missed, every sound you ignored. Every time I turned up the TV, put in my earbuds, shut the world out. The dragging noises, the faint crying, all of it. I started wondering if she'd been trying to send signals the whole time and I'd just tuned them out. It messes with your head. You think you'll act fast in a situation like that. But when it's real, when it's happening right there, your brain doesn't want to believe it. It wants to cling to the idea that everything is fine. Because the truth is too horrifying to sit with. I didn't tell many people. Just my brother and one close friend. It felt too heavy to just drop into conversation. And honestly, I was still shaken. I kept thinking, what if no one had called? What if I hadn't been home? What if I'd just kept ignoring it, assuming it was plumbing or late-night TV? She would still be in there. Or worse. And the truth is, I almost didn't call. I hesitated, even after hearing her scream. A part of me was afraid I was overreacting, afraid I'd bother the police for nothing. That thought still haunts me. How close I came to doing nothing. A couple of weeks later, I broke my lease. I couldn't stay. Every creak, every noise made me jump. I couldn't stop picturing her in that room, terrified, tied up, waiting for someone to help. The landlord didn't give me any trouble. I think they just wanted to move on and bury it. But the unit next door stayed empty for a long time. No one wanted to live there after that. I couldn't blame them. That wall, it never felt like just drywall again. It became something else entirely. A reminder of how blind we can be to the horrors unfolding right next to us. Even now, whenever I move into a new place, I check the walls. I know it sounds paranoid, but I can't help it. If I hear something weird, anything, I stop what I'm doing and I listen. I don't brush it off anymore. I'd rather be wrong and embarrassed than right and silent. That experience changed me. It changed how I see everything. We're all so wrapped up in our own routines. Our music, our shows, our screens. We tune out the world around us. We don't notice the screams unless they're loud. And even then, we hesitate. Because we want to believe everything is safe, predictable. But sometimes it just isn't. The weirdest part? After the arrest, after the cops, the neighbors, the news vans, it all stopped. No more crying. No more dragging sounds. Nothing. Just silence. And that silence, it still creeps me out more than anything else, because it reminds me of how easily something awful can hide in plain sight, and how little we really know about the people living just one wall away. I don't talk about this much. Honestly, whenever I've tried, people either brush it off or get visibly uncomfortable and steer the conversation elsewhere. But this memory, it's been wedged in my brain for years, like a splinter I can't dig out. Maybe writing it down will help me finally put it to rest. I was 17 at the time, still living with my parents in a quiet suburb just outside Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. One of those places where neighbors wave politely but don't actually talk to each other, where every lawn looks the same and nothing ever really happens. That summer was brutally hot and achingly slow, the kind of heat that makes the air feel thick, where you break a sweat just standing in the shade. The only remotely interesting thing going on was this new girl, Sarah. She'd just moved in across the street with her parents, 15, full of this bright, chatty energy that felt totally out of place in our sleepy neighborhood. She always wore oversized t-shirts, scuffed Vans, and had this big, effortless smile that made you like her whether you wanted to or not. We weren't exactly friends, but we'd exchange casual hellos now and then. Sometimes she'd wave while I was mowing the lawn or call out a quick hey if we crossed paths while I walked the dog. Just neighborhood stuff. Then there was Mr. Delaney. He lived at the end of our block in this weather-stained rancher with a sagging porch. I never knew his first name, nobody did. He must have been in his late 60s, maybe older, and looked like someone who'd just stopped trying. Same gray windbreaker every single day, even in the dead heat of July. His hair was wiry and overgrown like he hadn't been to a barber in years. He didn't seem dangerous, just off. Slow, maybe. He'd shuffle along the sidewalk with his eyes locked on the pavement, shoulders slumped like he was carrying some invisible weight. If you greeted him, he'd freeze for half a second, like the words had to fight their way through some fog in his head. Then he'd offer this small, twitchy smile and nod before continuing on. Sarah, though, she talked to him. A lot. More than anyone else, really. I'd see them from my window or during dog walks, her sitting on his porch rail, him in his usual chair, the two of them deep in conversation. It never looked creepy. She didn't seem afraid of him. If anything, it looked like she felt sorry for him. Then one day, she vanished. Just like that. No warnings, no screams, no broken windows or tire marks in the street. Gone. I remember that Monday like it was scorched into my skin. The humidity was unbearable, like the air was pressing down on you. At dinner, my mom mentioned she hadn't seen Sarah outside in a few days. It struck me as odd, but not alarming. Not yet. By Tuesday morning, there were 2 cop cars parked outside her house. I looked through my blinds and saw her parents on the lawn. Her mom was pacing in circles. Her dad just sat on the steps with his face in his hands. One of the officers was going door to door asking if anyone had seen Sarah after Saturday night. I hadn't. But something about the whole situation made my stomach knot. The way the air felt still and electric, like a thunderstorm was coming even though the sky was clear. Then came the whispers. Some neighbors said she must have run away. Others were convinced she'd gotten into a stranger's car. The theories spread fast, but nothing concrete. Not until about a week later, when Joanne, who lived 2 houses down from Mr. Delaney, told the police something that changed everything. She said she'd seen Sarah walk into Delaney's house around dusk that Saturday. Said she didn't think anything of it at the time because she'd seen them chatting before. But the disturbing part? No one saw her leave. Not that night. Not ever. Another neighbor came forward with the same thing. They saw her go in but never out. That's when everything shifted. It was like someone flipped a switch. More cops arrived. Crime scene tape went up around Delaney's property. The whole block fell into this eerie, watchful silence. People stood behind their curtains, whispering and watching. But Delaney, he didn't react. He just sat in that faded plastic lawn chair on his porch, rocking gently, his hands folded neatly in his lap. Like the swarm of investigators digging through his yard wasn't even real. Like none of it concerned him. There was no anger, no fear, not even confusion. Just that same vacant stare and the slow creak of the chair beneath him. They brought in dogs, started digging. First the backyard, then the garage. At one point, they were even crawling under the porch. I stood at the edge of the curb with a cluster of neighbors, all of us locked in that same stunned silence. None of us said it, but we all felt it in our bones. Something was deeply wrong. Still, Delaney didn't move, didn't speak. Then, late in the afternoon, they opened the front door to his house. I remember that sound with perfect clarity, this long, high-pitched creak, like the wood itself was trying to warn them not to enter. It made this groaning noise, like a door that hadn't been opened in years, not just creaky but reluctant, like the house itself didn't want to let anyone in. I couldn't see much from where I stood across the street, but I remember this sudden cold in my stomach. My whole body tensed up, like it already knew something was terribly wrong. Nobody had said anything yet, but it was like my instincts were screaming. They stayed inside for hours. No shouting, no slamming of doors or hurried footsteps, just quiet movements, muffled voices over radios and the occasional shadow passing behind the curtains. Then an unmarked white van pulled up. That's when everything shifted. One of the officers came out pale as a sheet, talking quickly into his phone. Within minutes, more vehicles started arriving. Detectives, forensics, people in full suits and gloves, the kind you only see on TV when something really bad has happened. The cops pushed the neighbors back down the block, told us it was for our own safety. I tried to stay close, to pick up on anything, but eventually an officer came over and told me I needed to go home. "We'll release information soon," he said, but his face told a different story. Something grim he wasn't allowed to say out loud. That night, lights stayed on inside Delaney's house until well past midnight. Figures in white moved in and out carrying boxes and sealed containers, their expressions unreadable. But the most unsettling part? They didn't bring Delaney out. Not for hours. When they finally did, it was almost sunrise. The next morning it hit the news. Local channels ran it as, "Missing teen linked to local man's home." Somehow the media already had pieces of the story. They reported that police had found a concealed room in Delaney's basement. Not just hidden, sealed from the inside. That detail messed me up more than anything. How does a room get sealed from the inside? Who sealed it? Why? And what was in there? The article didn't offer answers. The police refused to confirm much, only saying the investigation was ongoing. But sources claimed they'd found personal belongings. Sarah's backpack, some of her clothes, maybe even her phone. But not Sarah. She was still missing. That's when the neighborhood lost it. Parents started keeping their kids indoors. Some families packed up and left town for a while. Delaney was taken into custody, but the last anyone saw of him, he looked vacant. Not confused, not scared, just hollow. Like he had no idea what any of it meant. Or maybe like he didn't care. They never charged him with murder. Only unlawful detainment. That's all they could prove. And while rumors started flying around, like wildfire, nothing official ever came out. People whispered about what they might have found. chains bolted to the floor, a stained mattress, a bare light bulb hanging from the ceiling. Some even said there were deep scratch marks on the inside of the walls, like someone had been trying to claw their way out. I don't know what's true and what's neighborhood horror lore, but what I do know is this: Sarah was never found. And after a few weeks, the questions started piling up faster than the answers. If that room was sealed from the inside, how did her things get in there? Why didn't anyone hear anything? No screams, no banging, nothing. Just silence. The city eventually boarded up the house and it sat empty after that. But people claimed to see things, lights flickering in the windows when no one was inside. One night someone said they heard crying. A girl's voice, soft and far away. I don't know if I believe that, but after everything that happened, I can't say it's impossible either. I only walked by that house once after it all. I didn't mean to. It was months later, and I'd taken a different route home without thinking. I didn't realize where I was until I looked up and saw it. The boards were still up, but something new caught my eye. Deep scratches along the wooden frame of the basement window. Long, frantic-looking gouges, like someone had clawed at it from the inside. My whole chest tightened. My brain couldn't even fully process what I was seeing. I just stood there, frozen, staring at those marks until a passing car jolted me out of it. I turned around and walked home as fast as I could. That was the last time I ever went near that end of the block. Years have passed. I moved away, left that town behind. But I still think about Sarah, about how someone like her, so vibrant, always smiling, could just disappear. No trace, no explanation, and the worst part? It happened in a house we all walked past every single day. Delaney ended up in some kind of facility. They said he wasn't mentally competent to stand trial. Last I heard, he died in his sleep. Never gave a confession. Never said a word about the room. Just gone. Like he took all the answers with him. And that's the part that haunts me. It didn't build slowly. It didn't escalate over time. 1 minute she was there, waving from across the street. And the next, she was gone. Like the universe hiccuped. Like reality glitched and erased her. No warning, no closure. Sometimes I lie awake wondering if she's still out there somewhere. Other times I imagine her in that room, alone, terrified, waiting for someone to open the door. But the thought I can't ever seem to shake is that feeling I had standing on the sidewalk that day, watching the cops go in, like something evil had been there all along, right under our noses, and we never saw it. I moved into that apartment off campus during my junior year. It was one of those cheap rentals students grab because it's close to campus, and the landlord doesn't ask questions. He didn't care how many of us lived there, as long as the rent came in on time. There were 4 of us: me, Rachel, Jamie, and Lauren. The place was old and kind of falling apart. Peeling paint, sticky cabinet doors, mismatched tiles, but it worked, barely. The walls were ridiculously thin. You could hear everything. Dogs barking 2 streets over, traffic from the main road, people yelling at all hours. But the worst noise always came from the unit next to us. 2 older men lived there. We never really talked to them, not even a nod in the hallway. Still, we heard them through the walls almost nightly. Loud arguments, things crashing, sometimes screaming, always around 3 a.m. We joked about it at first, called it the night fights. It became this weird ritual. If someone heard it, they'd text the group chat. They're at it again. We'd laugh it off, share memes, maybe knock on each other's doors for a sleepy debrief. But as the semester wore on, it stopped feeling funny. The screaming got worse. It wasn't the kind of yelling where 2 people were fighting. Sometimes it sounded like one person crying out in pain or fear and the other just quiet. Not yelling back, not reacting, just calm, or maybe just listening. That silence, it made everything worse. One night I pressed my ear to the wall during one of those episodes. The screaming had stopped suddenly, and then I heard whispering. Not just a few words. Whispering that went on, soft and steady, like a prayer or a chant. I don't even know how long I stood there like that, frozen. I was only pulled out of it when Rachel walked in behind me and said, what are you doing?" I jumped. I didn't even hear her come in. I just shook my head and backed away from the wall, muttering something about the guys next door. Behind our apartment was a narrow alley choked with overgrown trees and lined with a broken chain-link fence. It was pitch black at night. Raccoons would knock over the trash cans back there, so we were used to random clattering, weird scratching sounds. But one night, something felt different. I went to bed around midnight like usual. Then, sometime just before 3 a.m., I woke up like someone had yanked me out of a dream. No sound, nothing, just an eerie stillness. Then, tap, tap. It came from my window, soft, deliberate. I froze. My room's on the ground floor and my bed sits right against the wall under the window. At first I thought maybe it was a branch tapping in the wind, but the sound was too regular, too human, like fingernails. I held my breath, staring at the curtains. I didn't move, not an inch. I just listened. Tap, tap, tap. It went on for, I don't know how long, a minute, 5. Time stopped. Then it finally ceased, and I slowly sat up, barely making a sound. I didn't pull the curtain back. I couldn't. I was too afraid of what I might see on the other side. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Soft, slow, moving away. Not raccoons, not animals. These were heavy human footsteps crunching on dirt and leaves. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning, I went outside and checked under my window. The ground was soft from the rain earlier that week, and I saw footprints. Big ones. Way too big to belong to any of the girls. I called the others out and showed them. Jamie tried to laugh. Maybe someone was drunk, wandered through the alley, got confused. But I knew better. It felt too intentional, too precise. That same afternoon, around lunch, we saw a police car parked out front. Not super unusual for our neighborhood, honestly. Stuff happened around here. But this time, the officers walked up to the apartment next door, the one with the screams. They knocked, and after a minute or so, one of the older men answered. Big guy, probably late 50s, heavy-set with this annoyed look on his face like they'd interrupted his nap. But he didn't fight them. No shouting, no fuss. Just nodded, turned around, and let them cuff him. They led him out, calm as ever. We stood there in our doorway just watching like a bunch of stunned idiots. One of the officers glanced over at us but didn't say anything. Just got in the car with the guy and drove off. You'd think that would be the end of it. But that night, I couldn't sleep again. I kept thinking about the tapping on my window, the whispering behind the wall, the calm way that man walked out with the police. Around 2:45 a.m., I sat upright in bed, completely awake, heart pounding for no reason at all. I was lying in bed, wide awake, when I heard something. A faint creak outside, almost too soft to be real. I froze. My room was dark, lit only by the dull glow of my phone screen. I grabbed it like a lifeline and slowly inched toward the window. This time I didn't just listen. I slid the curtain open. Just a crack. Nothing. Just the backyard. The broken fence. Trees swaying gently in the early morning breeze. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I stared out for what must have been 10 full minutes, barely blinking, every shadow looking suspicious. Eventually I forced myself back into bed. Somehow I must have drifted off, because the next thing I remember was waking to the sound of knocking, sharp and steady, at the front door. It was around 6 a.m. The sunlight spilled across the floor, too warm and bright for how cold I felt inside. I cracked the front door, still half asleep, and standing there was a police officer, not one of the ones from the day before. He asked politely if he could come in and speak with all 4 of us. Said it wouldn't take long. His voice was calm, but there was a weight behind it. We gathered in the living room, still groggy and confused, and let him talk. He started by saying they'd arrested the man next door, one of the two we'd always heard through the wall. Apparently he'd assaulted a woman in another part of town the week before, but that wasn't why he was there. He said when they searched the guy's phone, they found photographs. That got our attention. Then he looked at me, directly at me, and said something that made my stomach drop. They found pictures of a window, my bedroom window, taken from the outside. Not just one, multiple shots from different nights. I remember whispering, "How do you know it was mine?" The officer didn't hesitate. The floral curtains, they're visible in every photo. I couldn't speak. I just sat there, frozen. I didn't feel like a person in that moment, just a target, a thing, something someone had watched. The officer went on, said they hadn't found any signs of entry, but the window frame showed clear tool marks. Someone had tried to pry it open. That was it for me. I packed a bag that afternoon and stayed at a friend's place across town. I couldn't go back into that room without my hands shaking. The idea that someone had stood outside my window, taking pictures of me while I slept, maybe even trying to get in, it made my skin crawl. But the worst part? The guy they arrested wasn't even the only one who lived there, and no one ever saw the second man again. We tried asking the landlord, asked who the other tenant was. He just shrugged and said as far as he knew, only one person was listed on the lease. Rent was always paid in cash. No complaints. No reason to inspect. He looked genuinely confused when we pressed him. The police came back a couple more times with follow-up questions, but nothing ever came of it. No charges related to the window. No answers about the second man. Just more loose ends. The apartment next door stayed empty after that. Nobody ever came to clean it out. No movers. No trash on the curb. Just silence. One day the unit was buzzing with noise, and the next, it was like it had been abandoned. Even after I came back to our place, I couldn't bring myself to sleep in my room again. I dragged my mattress into the living room and kept it there for the rest of the semester. It felt safer somehow, being near the others. We bought a cheap motion sensor camera and installed it in the backyard just in case. For a while, nothing happened. Then, about 2 weeks later, it recorded something. Just a few seconds of footage, but enough. A shape, blurry, human, standing near the fence. Not moving, just watching. And then it was gone. The motion light had turned on, flooding the yard. We ran outside within seconds. No one was there. We brought the footage to the cops. They said they'd keep it on file, but didn't sound too hopeful. Said it could have been a shadow. Someone passing through. Maybe nothing at all. But I knew better. After that, I stopped opening the blinds, even during the day. Knowing someone had taken pictures from the outside made me feel constantly exposed, like the entire back wall was glass and I was always being watched. I even started sleeping with music on, just something to fill the silence. Every creak made me jump. Every soft sound outside sent my heart racing. I couldn't relax, couldn't feel safe in my own home. And it was worse because there was never a full explanation. No closure. Just scattered fragments that didn't add up. A missing tenant. A man with photos of my window. Tool marks on the frame. And silence. The police never followed up again. The unit next door stayed locked. The landlord didn't even try to rent it out. It's been over a year now. I've moved to a different city, a different apartment, but I still check my windows every night before I sleep. I still keep curtains closed and double-check the locks. I still catch myself listening when I wake up around 3:01 a.m., just in case I hear that tapping again. It happened last spring, toward the end of March. I was living in a small aging apartment complex just outside of Tacoma, Washington, with my 2 kids, Emily, who had just turned 6, and Noah, who was 4. My husband had left for an overseas work assignment a few weeks earlier, so it was just the 3 of us. I was doing my best to keep things together. School drop-offs, bedtime routines, working remotely during the day. It wasn't ideal, but we'd fallen into a rhythm that at the time felt manageable. That night, like every other, I got the kids tucked in by 8:30. Emily insisted on 2 bedtime stories, and Noah wanted me to check under the bed for monsters, something he never used to ask for until his dad left. After they were asleep, I made myself a cup of chamomile tea and flopped onto the couch, half watching some forgettable true crime docuseries on Netflix, just trying to wind down. Then, at 1 a.m., I heard it. The buzzer from the front entrance of the building. A harsh, metallic sound that cut through the quiet like a blade. It's the kind you press when you need someone to buzz you in from the outside. I live on the 3rd floor, and our system doesn't have any intercom or camera, just the noise. No way to talk back. No way to see who it is. At first I figured someone must have hit the wrong apartment. Maybe drunk. Maybe lost. I waited for a follow-up buzz that never came. Still, something about it got under my skin. It wasn't just the sound. It was how wrong it felt. Like the air shifted. I tried to brush it off, turned the volume up, and went back to my show. But the unease stuck with me. It was like my body knew something before my brain did. My skin too tight, like it was shrinking around me. Eventually, I turned off the TV and crawled into bed, but sleep didn't come easy. I kept staring at the ceiling, listening for any more sounds. Nothing. The next night it happened again. 1:06 a.m., a single buzz. Same as before. I froze on the couch, eyes locked in the door, every muscle in my body tense. Again, no knock, no footsteps in the hallway. Just that hollow, echoing silence afterward. My heart was hammering. I laid there awake for hours, staring at the shadows moving across the ceiling, trying to rationalize it away. Just a coincidence, I told myself. A technical glitch. Someone leaning on the button by mistake. But the next day I couldn't shake it. That pit in my stomach was still there. Heavy, growing. So I brought it up with Mrs. Gallagher, my downstairs neighbor. She's in her late 60s, lives alone, and always has fresh lavender by her door. "Hey," I said, trying to sound casual. "Did your buzzer go off the last couple nights, around 1 in the morning?" She shook her head. "Nope, didn't hear a thing. Why, did yours?" I nodded slowly. "Twice now." Mrs. Gallagher raised an eyebrow, but didn't say much else. Just gave me that tight-lipped smile older women use when they're trying not to scare you. That's when the anxiety really sank in. If it was a random person pressing buttons, wouldn't someone else have heard it too? Later that evening, I asked the kids if they'd heard anything weird. Emily said no without looking up from her coloring book. Noah just shrugged and said, "I had a bad dream." That night, I found him curled up in bed with Emily. He hadn't asked permission. He just went there. That's not like him. Then came the 3rd night. It was worse. The first buzz came early, 10:03 p.m., just one. Sharp and loud. I was in the kitchen cleaning up dinner plates when it happened, and I dropped a fork. It clanged against the tile, echoing through the space. I stood there, frozen, just listening. Nothing followed. Then again at 1:11 a.m., another buzz. This time, I didn't move right away. I just sat there on the edge of my bed, clutching my phone in one hand, my other hand gripping the blanket so tightly it hurt. Every light in the apartment was off except the hallway nightlight. My breath felt stuck somewhere between my chest and throat. Finally, I forced myself up and tiptoed into the living room. I parted the blinds just enough to see out. There was someone standing by the bushes across the street. Not walking, not pacing, just standing. They were dressed in black, wearing a hood pulled low. The streetlight nearby flickered slightly, making everything look even more distorted. I couldn't make out their face, but I swear, they were facing my building, watching. My breath caught in my throat. I didn't sleep that night, not even a minute. I stayed in bed, every sound amplified in the dark, pipes creaking, wind brushing against the windows, the occasional distant car. I kept my phone clutched in my hand, thumb hovering over 911, heart pounding so loudly it felt like it was shaking the room. By morning, I couldn't take it anymore. I called Mike, the property manager. He's in his mid-50s, always smells like stale coffee and that musky cedar cologne guys wear when they want to seem outdoorsy. I told him everything, about the buzzing, about the figure I saw, about how it kept happening at the same time every night. He let out a long sigh like I was overreacting. Probably just a kid messing around, he said. Or a homeless guy. You know how it gets around here sometimes. I'll keep an eye out, but it's probably nothing. Mike, I said, trying to steady my voice, this isn't just some prank, it's 3 nights in a row, the exact same time, and someone was standing outside watching the building. He chuckled lightly, like he was trying to calm me down. I get it, I really do. But unless there's damage or a break-in, there's not a lot I can do. I hung up, furious and afraid. I knew what I saw. And more than that, I felt it. That deep, visceral kind of dread that makes it hard to think straight. Like your body is already bracing for something and all you can do is wait. That night, I didn't even try to sleep. I didn't go to bed that night. I couldn't. I made myself stay up, sitting in the living room near the front window, all the lights off. My phone was clenched in one hand, a flashlight in the other, thumb twitching against the power button. I kept the kids with me in my bedroom, locked the door behind us and piled a few chairs against it, just in case. They were both fast asleep in my bed, unaware of the anxiety curling tighter and tighter in my chest like a fist that wouldn't unclench. Sure enough, right around 1 a.m., the buzzer went off again. But this time, it wasn't alone. I heard footsteps in the hallway outside, slow, dragging, like someone didn't care about being quiet, like they wanted to be heard. I froze. My whole body tensed. I couldn't even breathe. For a moment, I thought maybe I was imagining it, that my mind was playing tricks on me from too little sleep and too much fear. But then I heard it again, a shuffle, the faint scrape of a shoe. I got up, every step toward the door feeling like I was sinking into concrete. I leaned toward the peephole praying I'd see nothing. But there was someone, standing just feet away on the other side of the door. I couldn't make out a face, just a dark hoodie pulled low and what looked like gloves on their hands. They weren't moving, just standing there, waiting. I backed away as quietly as I could, barely daring to breathe. My fingers trembled as I grabbed my phone. I called 911. It was hard to even press the buttons. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped it. When the dispatcher picked up, I whispered into the phone, trying to keep my voice steady. "There's someone outside my apartment," I said. "He's right outside my door. I have 2 small kids with me." She was calm, thank God. She told me to stay where I was, to stay quiet, and that police were already in the area. I nodded even though she couldn't see me. Every second felt like a lifetime. I sat on the floor beside the bed, phone pressed to my ear, eyes locked on the hallway. I don't know how long I sat there like that. It felt like hours. Realistically, it was probably 10, maybe 15 minutes. At one point, I heard the person knock, softly, on a neighbor's door down the hall. Then nothing. Just silence again. Until a sudden loud bang echoed from downstairs. The front entrance. The police had arrived. A few minutes later, officers were outside my apartment. When I opened the door, my knees nearly gave out from the relief. But the hallway was empty. Whoever had been there was gone. Still, they found something. Pry marks on the window in Noah's room. My stomach dropped. I hadn't even gone in there that night. Both kids had slept with me. If they hadn't... An officer named Ramirez, probably in his early 30s, walked me through what he found. He was gentle about it, but the way he spoke, it made it real. "Looks like someone tried to lift the window from the outside," he said, squatting next to it. "Didn't manage to get it all the way open. See here?" He pointed to the frame. There were marks, scratches, even a bit of chipped paint. But what really made my blood run cold were the faint smudges on the glass. Fingerprints. Tiny ones, right next to where my son's head would have been if he were sleeping in that bed. The officers swept the entire property. Flashlights moved across every corner of the narrow pathways, the hedges behind the dumpster. They checked the laundry room, the bike racks, even the maintenance shed. Around 3:00 a.m., another knock. This time it was Ramirez again, his face pale, his voice more serious than before. "We found something," he said. He led me downstairs to the basement storage room, the one that's supposed to be locked, the one no tenant uses because it smells like mildew and burnt wiring. Someone had been living down there. They found an old sleeping bag spread out in the corner, a half-empty backpack, crushed snack wrappers, an empty water bottle, and worst of all, what was inside a black drawstring bag tucked behind a stack of boxes. Inside were gloves, wire cutters, a roll of duct tape, a flashlight, and a small, unmarked spray bottle filled with a clear liquid, and a notebook. Small, beat up. The pages were filled with scribbles, apartment numbers, notes on which units responded to buzzers, and then I saw it. My name, my full name, written 3 times. Turns out someone had been living in that basement for at least a week, maybe longer. He'd found a way in through the garage, which Mike later admitted hadn't locked properly in months. He was using the buzzers to study people, to figure out who was awake, who looked through their blinds, who turned on their lights. The single buzz was a test. The second was confirmation. They think that's how he chose his targets. I didn't sleep for 3 days after that. I sat up on the couch with the kitchen knife beside me, every light in the apartment on. Every noise, pipes creaking, neighbors walking above me, the fridge kicking on, felt like an intrusion. I barely ate. I barely breathed. 2 nights later, they found him, hiding behind a dumpster, just 2 buildings over. He was wearing the same black hoodie. His name was Brett Hammond. He had a record, petty theft, trespassing, and an old restraining order from a woman in Oregon. I didn't go to the court hearing. I couldn't bring myself to even think about being in the same room as him. All I knew was that he'd been watching us, watching me, and if I hadn't kept the kids in my room that night, I don't let myself finish that thought. We moved 2 weeks later. New apartment, new locks, new everything. Now I triple-check the windows every night. I keep the buzzer volume turned all the way down. I can't stand the sound of it, it turns my stomach. I never told the kids the full story. Just said someone was sneaking around and the police handled it. But sometimes, late at night, when the world is quiet and that old creeping anxiety starts to set in again, I think about those tiny fingerprints on the glass. And I wonder how many times he stood there, just watching us. I was 24 and in my second year of nursing school when it happened. I'd moved to Milwaukee a few months earlier and was renting a room in one of those old 4-unit houses near campus. It wasn't anything fancy, peeling paint, creaky floors, but it was cheap and mostly quiet, which was all I needed with the night shifts and endless study sessions. The house had 2 apartments on the upper floor and 2 below. I lived in the upper left unit. Across the narrow hallway from me was a guy named Ian. I only knew his name because a package for him got delivered to my door by mistake one evening. That was the only reason I even knew he existed. Ian was quiet. Not the awkward but polite kind of quiet. More like he wasn't really there. He never made eye contact. Never said hi. Just sort of drifted. Sometimes I'd pass him in the hallway and my stomach would tighten, like I'd just walked under a cold draft. I told myself I was just overtired or being paranoid from lack of sleep. Ian always wore a hoodie. Always. Even on the warmer days in late spring when I'd be sweating just walking up the stairs. I never saw him with anyone. No friends, no visitors, not even a food delivery. His door was always locked, always shut, and somehow that made that side of the hall feel colder. Not physically colder, just off. Like something heavy was pressing against the air itself. But it was the nights when things really started to feel wrong. It began with the faint sound of music drifting through the wall around 2 crown or 3 mon a.m. Not songs exactly, more like lullabies played in slow motion or ambient tracks that made the hairs on your neck rise. Then came the sounds of furniture scraping against the floor, like something heavy was being dragged. But I never heard him walking around. No footsteps, no talking, just those dragging sounds. And then the crying started. It wasn't loud. It wasn't even obvious at first. Just soft, muffled sobs, like someone trying not to be heard. They would come and go in strange intervals. I honestly thought maybe Ian was grieving. Maybe he was dealing with depression or had lost someone close. I felt bad for even being creeped out. But the more I listened, the more something about it felt unnatural. The crying wasn't random. It followed a rhythm almost like it was rehearsed. Timed. That's what started to unsettle me the most. Then came the smell. I'll never forget it. It hit me the second I stepped into the hallway one morning. This thick, rancid stench. Mildew, sweat, and something sharp and metallic underneath like pennies soaked in warm water. Like blood. I opened all my windows, thinking maybe a pipe had burst or something had died in the walls. But it just got worse. The next day I finally texted Dave, our landlord, who lived in one of the downstairs units. I told him the smell was bad and that it seemed to be coming from across the hall. He texted back saying he'd come by the next afternoon to check it out. That night I barely slept. The crying returned, but it sounded different, closer. It wasn't muffled by walls anymore. It was as if whoever was making the noise had moved closer to the door. Or maybe they knew help was coming. The next afternoon, around 2 p.m, I heard someone coming up the stairs. My clinical rotation had been canceled that day, and I was relieved I didn't have to be alone when Dave showed up. I stepped out into the hallway just as he hit the top step. He smelled it immediately. I saw the way his face changed, eyebrows pinched, lips pressing together like he was trying not to gag. Dave knocked on Ian's door, called his name once, twice. Nothing. I haven't seen him leave in days, I said quietly, arms crossed over my chest. Dave glanced at me, then turned back to the door. Screw it, he muttered, and pulled out his ring of keys. The first one didn't fit. His jaw tightened. He must have changed the lock, he said, like it wasn't a big deal. But it was. Tenants aren't supposed to do that without permission. That's when Dave stepped back, gave the door a hard shove with his shoulder, and the frame cracked as it popped open. The smell hit us like a punch to the gut. I stumbled back, covering my nose and mouth, eyes watering instantly. Dave pulled his sleeve over his face and stepped inside. I hesitated, heart pounding, then followed a few seconds later, holding my breath. The air inside felt wrong. Not just the stench, something else, like the room itself didn't want us there. It was dark. The curtains were drawn tight, and the only light came from a single old lamp on the floor, casting long, warped shadows across the room. Just enough illumination to make out vague shapes, and something else. There were clothes everywhere, scattered across the floor like they'd been dropped mid-motion. Food containers were piled in one corner, some still half full, others rotting. And in the center of the room was a mattress. No bed frame, no sheets, just a filthy mattress on the floor. At first I thought it was empty, but as I stepped closer I saw her, a girl. She couldn't have been more than 15, maybe 16. She was curled up, lying still on her side, her wrists zip-tied to one end of the bed frame, ankles too. A thin, stained blanket barely covered her. She didn't even flinch when we came in, didn't look at us. Her face was pale, hollow, almost expressionless. Her eyes were open but distant, like she wasn't really there. I froze. Dave just stood in the doorway whispering, "Oh my God. Oh my God." Over and over, like his brain couldn't catch up to what he was seeing. I couldn't move. I couldn't even breathe right. My thoughts jammed like gears grinding against each other, my body stiff as stone. Then she turned her head slightly. just slightly, and in the softest voice I've ever heard, she said, "Please don't shut the door." That snapped everything back into motion. I don't even remember grabbing my phone or dialing 911. One moment I was staring at her, the next my hands were trembling as I spoke to the dispatcher, my voice unsteady, saying, "There's a girl tied up in my neighbor's room." The cops got there fast, really fast, within minutes. They stormed in, cleared the place, got her out. I watched from the hallway as paramedics wrapped her in a blanket and led her away. She didn't say anything, just stared forward with those hollow eyes. We all had to give statements. Police questioned me, Dave, even the neighbors downstairs. Turned out, the girl was a runaway from a nearby town. Ian had met her online, pretended to be a teenager too, lured her in, and he'd kept her there, locked in that room for weeks. Weeks. I'd been living across the hall, sleeping, eating, studying, brushing my teeth, while she was trapped in that room, just feet away, right on the other side of that door. After the ambulance pulled away and the cops packed up, everything felt surreal. The hallway looked the same. The walls hadn't changed. But something inside me had. I couldn't stop picturing her lying there. Couldn't stop replaying the sounds, the smells, the feeling I'd ignored. The guilt hit me like a slow-building wave that never fully crashed. I'd heard things. Crying. I'd smelled it. I knew something was wrong, and I did nothing. Not until it got unbearable. That guilt still sits in my stomach like a stone. I keep thinking, what if I had knocked on that door a week earlier? What if I'd just asked? Would she have whispered to me too? Would Ian have panicked? Would it have made a difference? They didn't find Ian for 3 more days. He'd vanished before Dave forced the door, which meant he probably knew someone was coming. He'd gotten ahead of it. They eventually found him holed up in a storage unit a few miles away. I saw his mugshot online. Same dead stare, same hoodie, calm, expressionless, like he couldn't even grasp the gravity of what he'd done. When they called me in to give a full statement, I had to relive every moment, every sound I'd brushed off, every time I'd put on headphones to drown out the crying, every time I chose not to act. For days after, I couldn't even look at myself in the mirror. I moved out 2 weeks later. Didn't wait for the lease to end. I begged my cousin to let me crash on her couch. I didn't pack much, just what I could throw in a duffel bag. That building, that hallway, I can't explain how much it warped my sense of safety. You always think you'd know if something horrible was happening next to you, that your instincts would kick in, that you'd sense the evil, but you don't. People like him don't walk around with signs on their foreheads. They live next door. They keep quiet. They stay invisible. And we tell ourselves it's not our business, until it is. Until a door opens and the truth comes pouring out like rot. I think about her sometimes. I don't know her name. No one ever told me. I don't know where she is now or what kind of life she's trying to rebuild, but I hope she's okay. I hope someone is seeing her, truly seeing her, and making her feel safe again. As for me, I don't ignore anything anymore. If I hear a strange sound, I check. If something smells off, I don't write it off as old pipes or weird neighbors. I ask. I knock. I call. Because I can't unsee what I saw that day. And I'll never forget how easy it was to live right next to a nightmare, without even realizing it until it was too late. I'm not usually the type to post personal stuff online, definitely not something like this. But what happened to me last year still keeps me up some nights. And I don't know, maybe putting it into words, even anonymously, might help. My name's Chris. I'm 41. After my divorce, I moved into a modest little duplex on the north side of Jacksonville. Quiet neighborhood, mostly older folks. The kind of place where people give you a wave from their porches but don't ask questions. That suited me fine. I wasn't looking to make friends, I just wanted to lay low and rebuild. I was renting the left unit. The right side belonged to a man named Gary. He looked like he was pushing 70, always had this beat-up baseball cap on, even when mowing the lawn at sunset. We'd exchanged a few hellos, a nod here and there, but he wasn't much of a talker. Again, fine by me. I was in a keep-to-myself chapter of life. Out back, there was a detached garage. Nothing fancy. Old wooden structure, paint peeling, 2 creaky doors, and a single floodlight bolted above the entrance. I used it mostly for storage. Tools, some moving boxes, my bike, and all the miscellaneous junk you accumulate when a marriage ends. One night in early November, I came home after grabbing a burger from this 24-hour spot. It was around 10:30 p.m. I parked, stepped out, and saw the garage light was on. That caught me off guard. I knew. I'd turned it off before leaving. I double-checked that kind of stuff now. Living alone again made me paranoid in a cautious way. I walked around the side yard, unlocked the door, and peeked in. Everything looked fine. Nothing out of place. No mess, no signs of a break-in. Still, something felt off, like the air was holding its breath. I switched the light off, locked up again, and told myself I probably forgot. I'd been scatterbrained lately. Divorce does that. The next morning, I headed out to the garage to grab a wrench, and the moment I opened the door, my gut twisted. One of the drawers on my tool chest was halfway open. Another one looked like someone had rummaged through it. A small box of screws had spilled across the floor, and my box cutter, it was gone. That was the first thing I knew wasn't my doing. I'm meticulous with tools. I'd never just misplace something like that. I checked the lock again. Still intact, windows unbroken, no signs of forced entry. My mind started racing. Could a kid have snuck in? But how? The place was secure. Then I started second-guessing myself. Maybe I left the drawer open. Maybe the box of screws fell. I walked back inside, tried to get on with my day, but the more I thought about it, the more that crawling unease took over. That afternoon, I drove down to the hardware store and picked up one of those cheap motion sensor cameras. Nothing fancy, just something I could aim toward the garage from the corner of the yard. I wasn't expecting to catch anything, I just needed some peace of mind. For the next few nights it was uneventful, just clips of squirrels, raccoons, and one very persistent stray cat who kept sniffing around the trash bin. Then came the 4th night. It was around 3:12 a.m. I was reviewing the footage in bed, half asleep, when the motion alert came through. I tapped the screen, and what I saw made my stomach plummet. There, moving slowly across the camera's view, was a man. He came from behind the garage, tall, deliberate in his steps. The footage wasn't high resolution, but it was clear enough. He approached the back panel of the garage, knelt down, and slipped inside, through a section of the wood siding that had been loosened. I paused the footage and just stared. My skin felt like it was buzzing. I zoomed in. It was Gary. Same slouched posture, same old baseball cap. The way he moved wasn't frantic like someone caught in the act. It was slow, familiar, like he'd done it before. I must have watched that clip a dozen times trying to make it make sense, trying to convince myself it was someone else or that I was misreading it. But no, it was him. And the weirdest part? He didn't take anything. He stayed inside for maybe 5 minutes. Then he came out, the same way he went in, disappeared around the back, slipping through a gap in the fence that separated our yards. The next morning in daylight, I went to check the spot. Sure enough, a couple of the wooden slats near the bottom of the garage siding had been pried loose, just enough for someone to crawl through. That was the moment when my vague discomfort snapped into full-on dread. I should have called the cops right then. I know that now. But back then, I hesitated. What if I was wrong? What if he was just some confused old man looking for something he thought was his? Maybe he used to own the place. Maybe he thought it was still his garage. I didn't want to be that neighbor, the new guy stirring up trouble. So instead, I printed a freeze frame from the footage, stapled it to a piece of cardboard, and hid it in my bedroom drawer. And inside the garage, I left a note. Just a piece of paper taped to the tool chest. I know someone's been in here, it's on camera. I figured that would be enough. A warning, something to make him stop. And for a few nights, it did seem to work. No more strange lights, no new disturbances. I started sleeping a little better, until the following Monday. I got home from work around 6, groceries in hand, walked around the back like I always did, and froze. The garage door was wide open, not unlocked, open, like someone wanted me to see it. I rushed into the garage, heart pounding, and immediately knew something was wrong. The place was trashed. Shelves had been knocked over, tools scattered across the concrete like someone had thrown a tantrum or was frantically searching for something. A blue tarp had been ripped off an old cabinet I hadn't touched in months, and its doors were hanging open, empty. But it didn't feel like a robbery. Nothing valuable was taken. Just chaos. Like whoever had been in there wasn't looking to steal but to find something. Or worse, like they'd lost control in the middle of doing it. That same heavy, crawling feeling crept back up my spine, the one I'd felt when I watched the footage. But this time there was something new. In the back corner of the garage, near the spot where the siding had been loosened, there was a small pile of cigarette butts, 6 or 7 of them, nestled in a little blackened circle, as if someone had been sitting there, waiting. That was it. That was the moment I stopped making excuses for Gary. I called the police. When the officers arrived, I showed them everything. The footage, the cigarette pile, the loose fence slats, even the bent nails at the back panel. I expected skepticism, maybe a quick note and a promise to look into it. But to my surprise, they took it seriously, very seriously. They asked if I'd had any conflicts with my neighbor, any reason to believe he might target me. I shook my head. No, nothing. Gary's quiet. I barely hear a sound through the wall. We barely speak. One of the officers looked at me and asked, "Would you be willing to let us set up a sting?" I hesitated. A sting? Just keep things the way they are. Let the camera run. We'll keep eyes on it. If he comes back, we move in. I told them they could do whatever they wanted, as long as I didn't have to stay there during it. That night I packed a bag and crashed at my buddy Trevor's place across town. But sleep didn't come easy. I kept picturing myself walking into that garage on any other night. What if he'd been in there already, hiding behind the cabinet, waiting for me to flip the switch and shut the door? 2 nights later, at 2:40 a.m., the camera caught him again. Same slow approach, same path. He crept along the side of the garage like he was walking a line he'd rehearsed. But this time, he didn't go straight in. He crouched by the corner and just watched the garage door, waiting, studying. After a couple minutes, he moved toward the loosened panel again, started adjusting it like he was fine-tuning his entry point. His hands were methodical, like he'd done this before. That's when the squad car rolled up. No lights, no sirens. Just 2 officers moving fast through the side yard. Gary tried to dart back through the fence, but they grabbed him before he could get far. What they found on him made my blood run cold. A large hunting knife, a bundle of zip ties, and a pair of black gloves shoved into the inside pocket of his coat. They searched the area behind the fence in daylight. Just a few feet from where he was caught, hidden in some weeds, they found a black duffel bag. Inside, a roll of duct tape, a flashlight, and a small bottle of pills. Prescription unknown. That was when it became clear. He hadn't been trying to steal my tools. Later, one of the detectives walked me through their theory. The way he had loosened the garage panel weeks before. The cigarette butts. The fact that he'd come back at different times, like he was studying my schedule. It all pointed to something far worse than petty theft. He was planning to ambush you, the officer said quietly. Probably waiting for the right night, for you to come home late just like you do most days. It wasn't random. And the worst part? I'd been right there, feet away from a man who had been preparing, planning to hurt me. Maybe worse. And I'd ignored the signs, the light turning on, the drawer I didn't remember opening, that lingering sense I sometimes had while crossing the yard like eyes were on me. I brushed all of it off. Gary was charged with attempted burglary and possession of a weapon with intent to harm. They didn't have quite enough for attempted murder, but the DA said they were pushing for the maximum sentence. I never saw him again. After the arrest, his side of the duplex sat empty for a few weeks before someone finally came and boarded it up. I broke my lease not long after that. Didn't even bother packing everything, I just wanted out. Now I live in a condo. Underground parking, keycard entry, multiple cameras. I check every one of them before bed. Twice. I still have that screenshot. The one of Gary crouched in the shadows by the garage, sliding inside like he belonged there. It's in my desk drawer. I don't keep it to scare myself. I keep it to remind me. People ask sometimes why I didn't catch on sooner, why I wasn't more aware. But here's the truth. Horror doesn't always look like a monster or a masked figure in the dark. Sometimes it's the quiet neighbor with a soft smile, the one who tips his cap while watering his lawn, the one who nods politely when you pass, the one waiting for the moment you stop paying attention. I've never really been the type to post on forums like this, but what happened a few months ago still won't leave my head. I think I just need to get it out. I live in Salt Lake City, in a gated apartment complex that always felt pretty secure, keypad entry, cameras, neighbors who mostly keep to themselves. I moved in after my divorce, just trying to start over. Honestly, I liked how quiet it was. Peaceful, low drama. The building has a shared laundry room in the basement. You can only get in with a separate key, and it's not creepy or anything, just kind of dim and stale, the way most old basements are. I usually avoided going down there at night, not because I was scared or anything, just, I don't know. Something about it always made me uneasy when the sun went down. That night, though, I was out of clean clothes and didn't have much of a choice. It was around 8:30 p.m. when I grabbed my laundry basket and headed downstairs. The hallway lights were still on, casting that dull yellow glow down the concrete walls. But when I got to the laundry room, I noticed the door was slightly ajar. Not wide open, just cracked enough to show it hadn't latched all the way. That wasn't unheard of. People forget to close it properly all the time. I pushed it open slowly, and the first thing that hit me was the dark. All the overhead lights were off, but I could hear two machines running, the low hum and occasional thud of the cycle shifting. It made me pause in the doorway. Maybe someone had already started their laundry and just gone back upstairs. I reached for the switch, flicked it on. Nothing. No light. I sighed, assuming the bulb had gone out or maybe the switch was faulty. Either way, I wasn't about to bother maintenance just for one load of laundry. I turned on my phone flashlight, the cold white glow cutting through the dark, and stepped inside. I set my basket down and started tossing clothes into one of the washers. The room felt off. Not scary exactly, just wrong in a way I couldn't put my finger on. Too quiet, except for the machines, and colder than usual. Like a draft was blowing in from somewhere, even though the windows down there don't open. I hurried through it, just wanting to finish and get back upstairs. I slammed the washer door shut, reached to add detergent, and froze. There was someone standing in the doorway. A man. Just standing there, completely still. Not a sound. I nearly dropped my phone. It was the guy from the unit directly above mine. I didn't know his name. Never had a conversation with him. But I'd seen him a few times, walking his dog, smoking on his balcony. He always gave off this odd vibe. Not threatening, just off. Twitchy. Distant. Now he was just standing there, watching me. His face was blank, his eyes locked on me. Not like I'd startled him, not like he was confused about why I was there. He was looking at me like he'd been waiting. My skin prickled all over, every instinct screamed at me to leave. So I did the first thing I could think of. I pretended to be on the phone. "Oh, hey, yeah, I'm just grabbing my laundry. I'll be up in a sec," I said loud enough for him to hear, holding my phone to my ear. He didn't move, didn't blink, just stared. I muttered, "Excuse me," and forced myself to walk past him. Too quickly, probably, and back out into the hallway. I didn't run, but I was close. I didn't look back until I reached my apartment door. When I did, the hallway was empty. Once I was inside, I locked the door and leaned against it, heart hammering in my chest. I stood there for a long minute, trying to catch my breath. "What the hell was that?" I whispered to myself. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe I'd startled him. Maybe he'd just come down to check his laundry. But the machines were already running when I got there. And he didn't have anything with him. No laundry basket, no phone, no keys. Just him, standing silently in the dark. The more I thought about it, the worse it felt. Something was off. Deeply off. I even went to my window and waited to see if he'd come out of the basement. He never did. That whole night, I barely slept. Every little creak or thump from the ceiling made me jump. I kept thinking about that stare. Not curious, not surprised, just watching. The next morning, I tried to convince myself I was being dramatic. Maybe I was just stressed. Maybe the divorce and being alone had me on edge. I went back downstairs to switch my laundry like nothing had happened. He wasn't there. Everything seemed normal, but that feeling never really went away. After that night, I started doing laundry only during the day, even if it meant rearranging my work schedule. I didn't care. I wasn't going back down there after dark. One afternoon at work, I brought it up to a coworker who also lived in the complex. Just casually, like, "Hey, do you ever get weird vibes from that basement laundry room?" She laughed. "It's creepy as hell down there, but nothing's ever happened," she said with a shrug. "It's just old." I let it go, didn't push the topic. But after that, I started locking my door religiously, even during the day. I stopped using my balcony too. I didn't want to risk running into him again. Just the idea of seeing him out there, smoking and staring like before, made my stomach twist. 2 days later, everything changed. There were cops all over the building. I saw flashing lights through the blinds and pulled them open just in time to watch them escort someone out in handcuffs. At first, I didn't recognize him. His head was down. Then he looked up for a second and it hit me. It was him, my upstairs neighbor, the same man who'd been standing silently in the laundry room doorway. I felt sick. I didn't even know what had happened yet, but my gut was already tying itself into knots. Later that day, I went out and overheard a group of tenants talking near the mailboxes. One of them, a woman from the next building over, told me a girl had been attacked that morning, in the laundry room, same one I'd been in. She was okay, shaken but alive. She'd gone down early, around 6 a.m., and he was waiting down there, hiding. She fought him off and ran upstairs for help. That could have been me. When more details came out, it got worse. So much worse. He wasn't even supposed to be living in the building. The unit he was staying in had been marked vacant in the system. No lease, no record. Somehow, he'd slipped through the cracks and had been living there for months. No one knew how he got in. No one knew how he was paying for anything. But he'd been watching people. Maintenance found a hole, drilled clean through the floor of his apartment, directly above the laundry room. A peephole. He had been crouching there, watching. Just thinking about it makes my skin crawl. The image of him kneeling on that floor, staring through that hole in the dark, waiting for someone to come down alone. It's something I still can't shake. It makes my throat tighten every time I let myself picture it. And I keep thinking, if I hadn't faked that phone call, if I'd frozen, if I'd said nothing, if I hadn't walked away as fast as I did, what would have happened? He didn't say a single word that night. Not one. Just that blank, locked-on stare, like I was already part of something, already inside the trap. It didn't feel like a guy caught off guard. It felt like a plan that had already started, and I got out before it finished. That's what messes with me the most. People always imagine danger being loud, yelling, breaking glass, footsteps pounding behind you. But this was silent, slow, intentional, like I'd walked into a scene that had been set just for me, and I barely got out in time. The police never gave us many details, just that he had a record, mostly trespassing, one older assault charge. Nothing that screamed serial predator, but enough to make you wonder how many other times he'd gotten close, how many other people he'd watched. After he was arrested, neighbors started sharing stories. Weird things we'd all brushed off. Clothes missing from dryers, lights that didn't work, doors left open. All the little things that seemed like nothing until they weren't. Looking back, it felt like he was testing the waters, seeing how much he could get away with before going further. That's what scares me the most. How easy it is to overlook warning signs when they're wrapped in everyday life. When they're quiet. When no one screams. I moved out a month later. I didn't care that he was gone. I couldn't stay there. Every creak from the ceiling above me made my chest tighten. I started avoiding any shared space. The mailroom, the trash chute, even the parking lot. I still live in Salt Lake, but my new place has in-unit laundry. That was non-negotiable. And no basements. Ever again. Even now, I catch myself checking over my shoulder in stairwells and parking garages. That kind of fear doesn't just leave. It settles in you, gets into your muscle memory. You don't even realize how tense you are until you're somewhere safe. And that doesn't happen often anymore. Not really. And the weirdest part? After everything that happened, part of me still wonders what he was doing that night in the laundry room. Just standing there in the dark. Why didn't he do anything? Was I too early? Did I interrupt something? Was he waiting for someone else? I'll never know. The police never told us much. He never said a single word. Not when they arrested him. Not in court. Nothing. That's what haunts me. How it all just stopped. Like whatever was supposed to happen didn't. Like I escaped it by inches. But it was close. Way too close.